welcome to the podcast. Today we
Thank you.
have a special topic, at least for my standards. We're talking about PoE. We just had the Exilecon that finished this weekend, or last weekend rather. Lots of big announcements there with PoE2, the PoE mobile, and all the stuff they have shown. And we have our Path of Exile experts here, Palsteron, mbXtreme, and Crouching Tuna, all of which are also on the Path of Exile Maxwell team. And we're just going to talk about everything that we have seen, the different announcements, what we expect from PoE2, and just general thoughts. And before we start with going into all of the topics, let's start with a little introduction for everyone. Just say 1 or 2 sentences about yourself, what you do, and where people can find you, and these kind of things. Let's start with mbXtreme.
Yo, my name is mbX, or short form mbX. I'm a passionate Path of Exile gamer since, I think 2017 or something like that. Mostly known for gambling and MTX. And yeah, usually people can find me on the internet because I don't really want to share where I'm living here. Unless somebody wants to come over for a coffee, that's super fine. But yeah, usually Twitch, like all the normal things, /mbXtreme, you're probably going to find me there. And I'm currently working on my only MTX account. Okay, that's pretty much about me.
Okay, thank you. Palsteron?
I'm Palsteron. I make content for YouTube and Twitch about Path of Exile mostly. I make build-related stuff, but also flavor of the month and currency setups and whatnot. Just having a lot of fun. And I don't know, haven't done this for a while, 2 years by now, but I'm getting into the groove, and yeah, fun stuff.
Okay. And Tuna?
Yo, what's up? I'm crouching_tuna. You can find me on both Twitch and YouTube as well. And yeah, I'm covering a lot of build stuff, League Starter stuff, and also currency stuff. I'm mostly into endgame. That's really where I shine in Path of Exile, and then just finding some cool interactions to play around with. But yeah, I'm really into build making, and basically was very into juicing for as long as that lasted. And I'm just hoping to find the next juice every league, and showcase that, and also just have fun to play the game, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess most people here that have played some Path of Exile will probably know all these names. I see people in chat already saying I played builds from all of them. So yeah, lots of high-end creators here. And me, I mean, our viewers will know me. I'm wudijo. I am hosting this podcast. I've also played a lot of PoE, not as much as Diablo 3 or now Diablo 4, where I'm really into it. But I have 3-4K hours or something as well, so I like to jump in here and there at least. So I also tried to make some content here and there, but yeah, mostly focus on Diablo stuff. But the PoE announcement was really cool, I think, and this is why we want to sit down and talk about it, especially with our experts here that are much deeper in PoE.
Yeah, so, Woody is a lightning arrow main, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big bow enjoyer, yes. So lightning arrow and any kind of bow builds is always my kind of jam, but this is no news here, I guess, to most of the viewers. So.
And he's just jumping in with 3-4K hours, guys. Just dipping his toes in.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
Finish the tutorial, basically.
Just a novice, right?
Everyone here was probably laughing about my rookie numbers, yeah. So holding it back. Okay, anyway. Let's talk about the PoE2 announcement. So I guess this is the one big thing that everyone was waiting for. And I have also watched it. I watched the main announcement at least, and a few other things here and there. I have not watched everything, so I'm gonna mostly let you guys, dive into all the little details when we discuss. But I would like to hear your general impressions. What do you think about the announcement, and before going into all of the nitty-gritty topics. So maybe we can just start with mbX again.
Yo, I mean, I think personally for me, when I started watching it, a little bit delayed for EU times, because the actual live stream was somewhere midnight, I think, until 7, 8 in the morning, right? So I was like, oh, bro, that's gonna be rough. But yeah, the first big shock, I think we're gonna talk about this one a little bit later anyways, was the the real split between PoE 1 and 2, which the last couple of years it was like, hey, we're gonna have like separate campaigns and they're gonna meet up in the end and it's gonna be great, like a big expansion. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, by the way, we're gonna splitting the game and we're gonna have 2 games, which is in the first place gonna be like a big blast because there's like so much positive things about it, so much like negative things that came into my mind. I was like, damn, can I at least keep my MTX? But then I saw this like fine line, like, oh, you can like everything you have in PoE 1 gonna work for PoE 2, and I was like, okay, like big point is like done. Okay, I'm happy with that, and we're gonna see how everything is gonna develop. And obviously, it was like a real like I had a really good time about like watching this entire thing, especially all this like content creators sitting together, giving their thoughts and feelings about it. All this like the interviews and everything. It was actually really great, and I'm really looking forward to what's coming, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pal.
For me, the greatest thing about these kind of events is always when non-PoE players come together and just have fun with us, and everybody's just like gaming. Everybody's just like looking at the announcement. It's not as much about like PoE versus Diablo or something. Everybody just wants a good game, right? That's pretty cool. But my first impression was also shock, followed by like grief, the 7 stages of grief, right? And then at some point I was like, wait, we get a really good game though, so it's all good. But yeah, I was a little bit shocked by the split that we're going to talk about.
You're actually unhappy about that, or what?
I was. I'm not sure. It was just like for 4 years we thought it would be like one game. I just had to acclimate, right? I don't think I think they're going to do a good job overall. It's going to be, yeah. PoE2 is going to be awesome. I do believe that.
Yeah,
it looks
amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
I
are
think
your impressions?
everybody
Timo?
shared Palsteron's sentiment as to like because so much has changed since the last Exilecon, right? So we came in like sort of thinking one thing, and then obviously they changed that. So it might not be like a negative sentiment, but it's just, you know, we open it up and we see them. It's like, oh, now they're 2 separate games, and then you start seeing gold drop, and you're just like, what is going on? But yeah, I mean, I think the game looks absolutely fantastic. And it's going to be sort of like a little bit of a perception shift at first, because they are proposing to make a completely new game. And a completely new game, of course, is going to have its own problems, but it will be unique to that game, right? So the problems that we currently have in PoE 1 are not really directly translatable to PoE 2, and all we can judge right now is how it looks, and sort of like the judgment from the content creators that went there. And of course, it was sort of an unbalanced mess, but from the people that did actually put their time into the game and testing different classes and stuff, you know, I'm pretty confident that the game is going to slap. And I'm really happy, actually, and you'd probably be happy about this too, Woody, but the Huntress class is insane. And yeah, I think the core systems of the game are really sound, and that's like the most important part. Balancing and speed and all that kind of stuff can come later. But I think what they're going to do is they're going to start the game off here, and you know, they can't continue off where PoE2 left off, obviously, because that's decades of power creep. Not decades, but like almost 10 years now of power creep. And they just have to sort of take it down a few notches, and that's where we'll start. And from there on, we, you know, can continue on to another 10 years to where we are now, I guess.
Until we're zooming at 800 miles an hour and we're like, you know, like, tall like a tower with Headhunter and...
Yeah. And waiting for Path of Exile 3.
Exactly.
Yep.
That takes it down a few notches again, and the cycle continues.
I mean, RPGs are like, power creep is just mandatory, right? Like, imagine like you go into the next patch and you don't get stronger at all. You're just like the exact same character. That's no fun, right? So it's kind of like we have to have power creep for these games to progress and to continue to be fun. And of course, the developers, they recognize that. And we've come to a point in PoE2 where, if you notice, like the last, since 3.15, there's been a lot of nerfs. And that's just because they got to the point where it's like the bubble's about to burst and they can't really contain the power anymore. And they just have to not, like, bring it back a bit. And I think PoE2 is going to be a good opportunity for them to sort of have a fresh slate, but also reintroduce, like, completely new ideas and learnings that they've learned about in PoE1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, PoE3 will fix everything.
True, yeah.
Yeah, like for me personally, I gotta say the announcement was really cool, and I'm actually very happy, like from more of an outsider perspective, about the split between PoE 1 and 2, because I think that's really allows them to like go way deeper with what they want to accomplish, I think, in PoE2. So I think this was a very good decision. And also with like, the cadence of the leagues, they're probably gonna try to like kind of like dominate both like the Zoomer market, right, of PoE1, where like you just go crazy, and then PoE2 being like a much more like grounded, like down to earth kind of, game, I think, at least at the start, and then, eventually you have to power creep, I guess. But yeah, I would definitely expect that they actually have like a really good like market share of that, right? Because they have both these types of players in under one roof, basically. So I think this is like a really strong decision they made there.
Yeah, I would still temper your expectations for like having a grounded game because they always go crazy. So I would think that the game's still gonna be a little bit faster than what they showed us, which is a little bit weird. But they didn't really have any like optimal setups, right? Like players like us who strive for those optimal setups, we're gonna test beforehand, right? We're gonna go in and the game's gonna be half solved for us. And yeah, it's gonna be a very different experience. I also want to make clear that I don't think PoE2 is gonna be as easy to figure out before release because they usually have so many variables that you have to test out, and there's not that much time. So that's gonna be very hype, right? People are gonna go in half blind. But yeah, I would just temper your expectations if you want like a slower than D4 experience or something. I don't think it's gonna be slower than D4, for example.
Maybe in the campaign it will, but as you progress, I think the campaign will be like relatively slow. But then once, like especially like the first few, right, until we figured out like what is the best way to gear through the campaign, like all that kind of stuff. I think the first couple will be like a little slow, but I think like what we saw is as slow as we'll ever see, right? It's like the warrior gameplay, for example. It's like, of course, they already told us that was like overtuned, so they tuned everything to basically like if anybody's knows about Gauntlet, they basically tune everything to like Gauntlet levels of HP to just sort of really showcase animations and streamers getting their asses kicked.
Yeah,
which is also fun to see, I guess. So you see like all these pros, that know their stuff and they get absolutely wrecked. That's also good.
This is like,
I mean, Neo died in the first hour, right? Like in the official gameplay, he died to a boss. So yeah, sorry, mbX.
The thing is, like, it was like kind of weird because in one hand, like Exilecon is a show, right? Like honestly. And it's here to entertain, and everybody has like their time span. Okay, Woody has to play like a campaign now for like 30 minutes, and then we move on with the content, stuff like that, So it was known that these, first of all, it's in the campaign, right? It's not like if you compare Path of Exile 1, you're currently in Act 7, you're level, I don't know, 50 or something, you have a bunch of rare items, and you're like just cruising along, right? Since PoE2, I think, only has like 5 or 6 acts or something, and they showcase like Act 4, which is kind of similar to like Act 7 or 8. So the monsters were completely overtuned, and if you check the gear, like every streamer, the first thing they did is just open their inventory, check their gear, and half the gear was blue. So in which scenario are you Act 7 in PoE1 and have like almost blue gear? Unless it's like Ruthless, right? So you have overtuned monsters, and the players have like really shitty gear, right? So it was completely set up to fail, and this is like the kind of thing, because if they would make like the content easier, and then I don't know, like Sis or so logs in and is like, oh, I'm just gonna browse through the first 2 zones, kill like 1 or 2 bosses, and 10 minutes are gone. So what I'm gonna do the next 20 minutes, right? So and as a viewer, you watch this and say like, bro, Path of Exile is like really hard. It's really slow, And then I saw the gameplay of Preach, where he basically played as like a warrior or something with the slams. And since the white monsters did not give flask charges back, he met this like one rare monster that had life regen. And he was just not aware of like frost bomb and life regen removal and stuff. And he was like fighting this mob for like 10 minutes straight. He was completely out of flasks. He had like no chance against this monster until he realized, I'm not gonna make this. And then he moved on. And I was like, oh man, this is so sad too much, So it's like, on one hand, they want to entertain basically and like spend the time. But as watching it and be like, oh man, Reddit is full of like, oh, PoE2 is like so bad and so slow and so whatever, And this is like the kind of thing that is for me personally, because I would say normally a very positive person, when people come here and just because of watching this gameplay on Exilecon, they already know exactly what's going to happen in endgame and how PoE is going to slow down. Which I'm like, compare Act 7.
The presentation was still a little bit questionable, right? For PoE.
Sure.
PoE1 players, right? But everybody else looking at it probably loved the speed, right? Like everything, like seeing everything. I think it was mainly just PoE1 players. One thing about the magic items, though, is we didn't really see many rare items drop. We didn't see any Orb of Alchemies drop or essences drop or anything like that. So maybe it's actually a special thing to get rares and acts now. I'm just throwing it out there. I have no idea. Could be a thing. Yeah.
I wouldn't be
From the
surprised if
chats I
there's.
had.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, Woody.
No, you.
Okay. From the chats I had with people that played, they're pretty common, dropping from like uniques and rares, and we didn't really see many people kill many uniques or rares, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
And they want to put a lot more emphasis on like picking up bases since you can't scour things anymore. So you'll be like picking up bases and alching them, but the currency did seem very rare, and also like I feel like the drops were very curated. There was a point in the presentation where somebody asked like, "Oh, is there a potential to like drop this?" And the dev was like, he said, "No, I don't think you can drop this," or something. So I suspect that they probably like limited drops for the demos as well.
Yeah,
Double
it could be.
filter.
Yeah, like my point was, yeah, I think they're probably like just trying to slow down this whole progression. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it is actually intended that you have like a lot of blue items in the early game, and then kind of like have something to work towards without these like crazy endgame crafts, that we know in PoE1 right now. And it's probably more like, okay, you get rares, it's a bit more in the direction of Ruthless, which is not necessarily bad. I think it's gonna be like more exciting when you actually do find a rare and it does have some nice rolls on it and these kind of things. But I also do agree that like all the showcase gameplay, it all looked like kind of slow, and that was probably on purpose. And drawing any kind of conclusions on that, with how it's gonna look later is really like premature at the very least, right? Like we've also seen this, like I'm not sure like if you guys have played like the D4 beta and then now D4 release, for example, and you see
the
these
beta was
these are very different games, right? So the level 25 beta, and everyone was making their plans for endgame builds, and everyone was saying, "Oh, this is so slow and boring, and nothing going on and stuff." And yeah, of course, it's level 25. What do you expect, right? So yeah, I don't say that it's like perfect in the endgame or anything, but the same thing will happen with PoE as well, right? Like you start slow and then you become faster and faster, and it's like kind of like the sense of progression that you have as well, right? So that's probably also what's gonna happen. Eventually, we're gonna figure stuff out, and we're gonna have a lot more access to tools and whatever to like make our characters stronger. So I think it's gonna be just fine, even for the PoE1 zoomer enjoyers, right? Maybe not as crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, like games in general, right? When they come out, there's like a general knowledge pool, which is pretty low, because maybe a few streamers are going to test it, a few, I don't know, journalists or whatever. They're going to have people testing it, but in general, not much is being known. And then over time and time, there's going to be established things that everybody does, tricks that everybody knows the layouts, everybody knows the fast ways to progress, right? Which is going to make the game easier. So starting it off at a harder point is probably a good thing for the longevity, right, as well.
Yeah, exactly. You always have to see that people are going to figure out a lot of things, right? And metas will be established, and the knowledge, like just the way that we share knowledge these days for these games, right? We have content creators, we have guides, we have max roll, we have like this stuff is getting figured out super fast. Like if you look back like 10 years, for example, when D3 came out, no one knew anything, and even 4 years later, no one knew anything. Like it took a long time, and now look at D4, for example, right? Like I'm basically like living that process right now, where the game comes out and we're trying to figure out everything as fast as possible, and we are getting to that same point that we were in D3, like 5 times faster these days because of how we share information. And that also like just like allows us to like annihilate the game basically, right? And the same will happen in PoE2, I'm sure.
What do you want to say with that? Shut down max rolls so we can enjoy games for longer because we don't know
what
everything right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it.
We are the problem. We are the problem, boys. Yeah. It's us. It's us.
Yo, the gaming industry has to adapt to us.
True.
Yo.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What do you want to do, right? You can't just not have people stream the game. You can't not have people write about the game or something. This is just how it is, right? This is the internet, so this is how it has developed now. And yeah, I mean, the game developers will have to adapt to that and kind of like see that coming, I think, right? With like how players are gonna pick apart the game. So
to be fair, I think PoE and GGG are very they're very good at sort of keeping it fresh because of how adaptive and how flexible they are at sort of changing things within the game. You know, things can drastically change from league to league, right? So in one league you might be like playing one thing, and then the next league is just trash. So it's kind of like it always keeps us on our toes, and it always has something good to make content about. I think that's why it's pretty good also to be a good like a PoE content creator. There's no beta for the leagues,
Yeah.
right? Usually, so you just go in and you have to figure things out in the first 2 weeks. You probably see this from like Grimro's channel, that he's like every league he's just like, let's figure out the mechanic, and then he like gathers all this data. It's just like a gold rush kind of. I think that's really cool. And we
Yeah.
have that every 3 months, so.
And they're not like they're not gonna give us access like a month earlier and we're gonna figure everything out, right? That doesn't happen in
Yeah.
PoE really. Like if people are, I don't know, concerned about that, I guess if they were, right? That's not gonna happen. That's not GGG.
We will get that for PoE2 though, right? For the closed
yep,
beta.
I think, well, the beta is going to be accessible for everybody.
for
right?
everybody,
So it's going to
yeah.
be closed beta first, and then there's going to be an open beta. I think that's already confirmed.
That's because it's like a
basically.
new game and they have to test it. But when it comes to leagues, that's
The
we're not gonna be
leagues
testing
themselves, yeah, the league cycles, right? The 13-week cycles. We're not going to have like betas or anything. At least I don't know, but I don't think so. So everybody's going to go in head first. And honestly, as a content creator, I don't know how you feel about it, Woody, but I actually like when I'm not giving anything beforehand because it's also a lot more relatable, right? Everybody's starting at the same time. And it's kind of nice to see everybody progressing. I don't know. It's also less pressure, right?
No, it's actually more pressure in my opinion.
Really?
I mean,
oh yeah, to perform in the first few days, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, okay, in D3 we always had the PTRs. It's like a month in advance, and you could test everything, and like you could like make all the builds, etc. So it was like a very chill schedule. But now, also in D4 they have not done any PTRs, no beta. Like the patch just came out, and there you go, right? And we had like 2 days to prepare. So that was like obviously really crazy. And now we're still figuring out things, and I personally really enjoy that as well. So I'm like I really like this PoE style with like just like throw in the patch, and even if stuff is a bit buggy, etc. Sure, right? If they fix it, it's all good. And it doesn't always hit the mark exactly, but I like that a lot more, to be honest, because it also just kind of like requires this adaptability. How do you say that?
Is it adaptiveness?
Adaptation. Yeah, but basically,
Adaptability,
exactly that. So, like the patch comes out, and there's a, for example, there was a race now in season 1 in D4 and stuff like that, and you didn't really know how it would play out, and they're kind of trying to figure out stuff on the fly. So I personally really enjoy that. So,
I kind of completely disagree with that. Just like thinking back on some games, for example, let's say Diablo 4, for example, right? There has been a bunch of like content creators that had like this early access, right? They could have played the entire like beta for like until level 100 and stuff like that. So in the sense of a content creator, we're all living from like the clicks and everything, and I go in and I know like, hey, in like 3 days we're gonna start Diablo 4. And it's gonna be crazy. Everybody's gonna try out new things and whatnot. So the day before, I opened my YouTube feed and everything was full level 100 this, level 100 that. This build has been figured out. Here's the whirlwind barb. This is perfect, So me as a content creator, I'm like, okay, then I don't have anything to do because all these people had like a head start like a week or 2 weeks prior. So I guess that like just from this point of view, it's just like unfair, right? But in PoE, since nobody has ever like any early access, I mean there is like alpha access. Some people have that where you could like test the league, but it's completely NDA. You're not allowed to say anything about it, test anything, or at least like share any information. It's completely not there. So that's why I like it when we all have this fresh start and everybody has to figure out things on the start, even though it's like pressure, but it's also like the fun part that everybody's like equal in that case.
I guess, yeah, I think he's agreeing, right? But I guess the one thing is, I don't think games can really be figured out like that before, or at least it's really rough. Like even you guys on Maxro, right? And also Blizzard did a lot of like hot fixes immediately and like patches immediately. So it's kind of, it's not like everything was already figured out. And I don't think any team could really do that beforehand. So I think it's kind of like overplayed anyways, but
I agree. I mean, I was actually part of that early access, like, a small circle, basically. I played Diablo 4 before it came out for like a few days and stuff like that. And yeah, of course, I mean, content creation-wise, that is an advantage, of course. You know, that was the entire idea of this, right? That people make videos about the game and, you know, showcase stuff. And, you know, it's also like marketing, basically, for them when the game comes out. But yeah, from a fairness perspective, in terms of like, you know, racing or, you know, also towards other content creators, I agree, it's a bit problematic. Kind of hard to solve that, I guess, for like the company itself, right? But it's also like a one-time special, right? It was only on launch, and now basically everyone has a equal footing, right? The patch comes and everyone has the same schedule and everyone has the same access to it. So I think that's okay.
I think it makes sense for launch. Just like it will make sense for PoE2 launch, right?
I think in PoE2 is going to be quite similar, to be honest, right? You're going to have like the closed beta, probably only certain people going to get invited, you know, some blasters, some content creators, etc. Then comes the open beta, I guess. Have they said exactly what about open beta?
No. They haven't said anything about closed beta either, to be honest.
Yeah,
exactly.
I suspect it's going to be very like open.
Yeah, I heard we can maybe even stream it. We'll see, I guess, right? But that would be cool.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe not, right? So it's kind of like, it may be a bit similar to D4, I guess, where at least like some people have a bit of an advantage or something, but this is only for like, you know, a one-time thing, I guess. And anything after that is probably like, you know, pretty balanced, I think.
In PoE, I'm not even scared because I know as soon as PoE2 hits, I'm gonna have like 2 years minimum of like pure content creation because Path of Exile is still Path of Exile, not Diablo, right? So if I think about this like new tree, the new mechanics, the new ascendancies, all the like, you know what, like 6-7 new classes, every like all 3 new ascendancies, figuring out builds of every single type, like I'm not worried at all. Like everybody can have a head start there. I don't mind because dude, this is gonna be a long-term project. It's not like, oh, we're gonna figure out things in the first week. It's not gonna happen at all, you know.
If they can figure out how to have PoE1 and PoE2 at the same time, and if it's actually gonna hold, right, the test of time, then it's such a win for content creators. Because usually after like, I don't know, 6-7 weeks, the game kind of dies off, right? Or for content creation anyways, in terms of like views and stuff. And usually you're not as hyped anymore yourself because you already did so much, right? But then if there's like PoE2 dropping and then PoE1 dropping and then PoE1, like that's gonna be just absolutely huge. If it works, that would be phenomenal, right? Like I just saw it whenever D4 came out. D4 came out like, I don't know, but 7-8 weeks after PoE League. And it was kind of like it would be with PoE1, PoE2, and D4 like gave me new life force whenever it came out, right? I made content and stuff like that, and just thinking about that, just being able to not have these like month-long breaks would be huge.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly what they're trying to accomplish, right? It's a PoE2 and PoE1 split now, so everyone was expecting, okay, it's gonna be like the same cycle, the same game, right? And now it's not anymore. So this is actually really huge, right? Because they can kind of like keep the entire player base, at least those that like both games, kind of like, you know, in the same spot. And for those, you know, there's still the other ARPGs, right? There's still Diablo, there's still Last Epoch, there's still, you know, whatever, right? Torchlight even, or whatever. So, yeah, you still have other ARPGs to play if you want. And you can repeat the seasonal cycles on like the same cadence if you want with just other games. Doesn't have to be that one. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will actually like also swap back between PoE2 and D4. I think those games actually look very similar, like from like the combat and all that stuff. PoE2 definitely looks like a bit more on the like, you know, complicated side, and D4 more on the casual side. But in general, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of similarities between the two games, and a lot of people will probably just do that.
Yeah, I already know a lot of people who, for example, play WoW and D4, right? That's the people who like to play Blizzard games in general. And yeah, the only concern would be, do people actually want to play just ARPGs? Because I know a lot of people want to play different genres, right? So are they actually going to play PoE2 and PoE1? I don't know. Like, I love ARPGs. Like, when I don't play PoE, I play like Last Epoch, I play Torchlight, right? I play Diablo. It's like, I can never get enough. But I know a lot of people who are like, after PoE, they're like, I gotta touch some grass and play normal games, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. How is it for you guys, like Tuna and mbX, with like other games?
I like playing other games. Like, I'm really
GeoGuessr.
Yeah, I play a lot of GeoGuessr. But I mean, if like I obviously like love PoE and RPGs, but I'm really open to like basically any game. I don't like story-based games, which I think is like something like I find like a lot of ARPG players, they just want to like do stuff and like get their brain stuck into like something that's like more, less about story, I suppose. But yeah, I really enjoy playing. For example, like if I get time to play like League, or if I get time to play, basically like any indie game. Like I wanted to get stuck into like Factorio, but maybe it's more like, for me, it's more of a question of whether it's like good for stream or not, like whether people would actually enjoy watching that or not. But if I, for example, was not streaming, I would play like pretty much everything.
I mean, it's kind of rough because I just cannot play games casually. That's like one of my biggest issues. Either I go full retard mode in that case, right? Or I just don't want to like play it at all. Like, hey, you could just download this game and play it for a day or two, see how you like it. I'm like, no, either I play it completely or I just don't play it. And
it's
as
in the name,
said,
yeah.
yeah, and as Palsteron said, it's like completely correct. Like, for me, I like to play variety games, like one game of like each genre, right? So when it says like, okay, Path of Exile fulfills all my needs, all the things that I love about an ARPG. So I'm not really so much interested in like playing other ARPGs. So I haven't played Lost Epoch yet. I have not played Lost Ark, any of that. I obviously play Diablo 4 just because I'm playing Diablo 4 or Diablo titles since like when I was young and stuff. So I will always play the new Diablo title when it comes out because it's just like history and stuff. But that's what I say. I'm like not so into that. And then I say like, hey, the next thing I play is like World of Warcraft since like 2006. So I'm playing this game forever, basically, right? I did try to play Final Fantasy 14 when it was like super hyped, and I got like 2 or 3 weeks into it, but there was like so much story, and I'm the typical or the classical story skipper. I've with 13,000 hours in Path of Exile. I have no clue about the lore, but this is not the lore is not the reason that I want to play a game. I just want to go in and just kill monsters, and the story behind them, I don't really care as long as they drop good loot, right? But yeah, this is like usually I just have like or a secondary major game that I play, and in this case it's World of Warcraft since a couple of years again. So I'm always like alternating in between those two. But as Palsteron also said, like when they're gonna make the transition from Path of Exile 1 and 2, and both have like separate leagues, and they are obviously gonna be time-wise in that thing that you could play both at the same time. They're gonna like match the leagues, so you have to like decide, right? So you can play like 2 months of PoE2, get all the challenges there, then log into PoE1, make the challenges there. Oh, in like a week there's PoE2 league again, and so you're gonna like, I don't know if there is like so much time left, especially if you're a person like me that goes for 40 or 40 challenges every single league, right? So I have to do it like twice now within 3 months, and I think probably not gonna be more left to do than Path of Exile, but I'm fine with that. I love Path of Exile, so
I don't like lore that much because like some games just feel like interactive movies, right? And for me, the important part in games is like a vibe, right? Like I don't know, like that little bit of ambient or like how stuff looks. It's not about graphics, but how it's arranged and stuff. That's way more important for me in like games.
For sure. I actually agree because like, so like the world building and universe is like very tied into the lore of a video game, right? And that really affects me a lot as a player. But I don't want to like listen to something. So for example, a good example of this would be like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring. They will never actually put the story in front of you and say like, oh, like like listen to this guy, multiple choice answer or whatever. But it's the games where like I've always been the most compelled with the story, because I will play through them and I'll be like, what the hell just happened? That was insane. And then I will like go on YouTube and just like, these guys make like video essays about like that sort of stuff. And I think Path of Exile as well is like does this very well because it has very good world building, right? Like you feel like you are playing Path of Exile. It never, things like hardly ever feel out of place. And sometimes it's like really weird because they manage to bring in some things that are like absurd. Like all of a sudden blue people are spawning out of a portal and you're just like, yeah, all right. But they do a good enough world building to where all of this stuff is like really fits within their universe. And I think overall that's very important for a video game. Yeah.
I think in PoE in particular, you kind of get the overarching idea of like, okay, what is the Atlas? How does it work? But you don't need to know all the specifics of like, what are all the different gods and what they're known for and these kind of things, right? You just kind of like know a bit what's going on. and
Yeah.
you do catch up these little details like on the side, right? So it's also relatively well done in my opinion. And for those people that want to dive deeper, they can do that, right? With the YouTube series like you mentioned, Tuna or something. So I know a lot of people do exactly that, right? They just catch up with it, and it can be interesting to dive into it, but I'm also not a big lore enjoyer, I gotta say. But I do appreciate it. There's like something going on, at least that's interesting.
But it's a weird thing, right? Like, because lore doesn't really affect us. We don't listen to it. But then, for example, if I play beta games and they don't have lore yet, and they're just like a shell of a game, it's also missing, kind of, right? Does that make sense? Where you notice when it's missing, but it's not as important when it's there, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's true. I totally agree with that. Like, if you just like play, like, it could just be like be any other random no-name game, right? If it doesn't have any lore, any story, it's just like you don't get attached to it so easily, right? Even if it's a really good game. So it is quite important, right? There's a reason why people come back to Diablo, because it's Diablo, right? Like, but this could be named something else and people would not play it as much, right? Because there is this kind of attachment that you have with that lore and with that series and all that stuff, right? So I guess it does have a pretty big pull effect after all.
You feel when there is something missing that you can ignore, basically. So there's
Yeah.
there is ignorance missing. So
Yeah, it's strange. Yeah, I wonder if there's like some if there's like some science on this, right? Some psychology topic regarding this. It would be interesting to see. But yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. So we talked a lot about the main announcement now and the split and a few things. I want to talk about more in detail about the combat and difficulty from what you have witnessed from the PoE2 trailers. We talked about it like being slow and all that stuff, but the question would rather be like, do you think this is a good move? Like, what do you expect? Like, what about the boss fights? We saw them were really long, really hard. We have the dodge roll, in these kind of things. So, like, what would be your opinions on these topics, actually?
I think it's a good move overall. I think they will probably make it to a point where you can still be zoomy, but nowhere near as fast as in like Path of Exile, which is probably fine. But at the same time, it's not as much about how powerful you're gonna be. It's more about how powerful you are relatively to the game, right? So, for example, let's say Diablo 4 would be half as fast, right? Being double as fast would all of a sudden feel fast, right? Compared to everybody else. And I think it's going to be the same in PoE, where you're still going to feel powerful in endgame, but it's just going to be toned down a little. And in terms of like difficulty, I like it. I'm mechanically, I've been broken by PoE. The way I've played the game is I try to completely just focus on build making and do that well, so I don't have to look at mechanics or anything like that. I'm just gonna steamroll through the game, and if they do it well, I will actually have to now look at what bosses do and like how to dodge and like getting mechanically better. So I will prepare with an Elden Ring playthrough, right? But we're gonna see how it goes. But I'm actually pretty hyped because that was an itch that wasn't really fulfilled by PoE1.
Tuna?
So for me, I'm like a huge enjoyer of scaling content, and I did like a lot of delving when I first started playing Path of Exile, like very very seriously, and I really enjoyed also like playing Greater Rifts in D3 and pushing N+ in World of Warcraft. So I think if there's like any kind of system like that where things can get progressively more difficult, or even if Path of Exile 2, when the game starts, it does feel like a little bit like that, I think that'll be pretty cool. But I do suspect that people are going to be like pretty much twice as fast and twice as powerful as we did see in the gameplay trailers when the game actually does release. Because obviously, like you saw some of the best PoE players and they were getting smashed. So imagine like the worst players. They just won't be able to play the game. And I feel like PoE2 is supposed to be like a little bit more approachable for everyone in general. They're sort of like I feel like they're like streamlining things to make it less difficult to get into the game early on, but they are also making it more engaging for people so that it doesn't just feel like a cookie clicker type of gameplay where you could just like basically just steamroll through everything. It's really really hard to judge whether this is going to feel good or feel bad, because from the trailers, looking at like the warrior getting stunned out of every single animation, that doesn't particularly look fun. But of course that's going to have to be like something that they look into and balance. And come the closed beta, they're probably going to get a lot of feedback about all of these things and how they can actually improve that. Maybe it's, you know, the fact that like you'll be able to get a gem that makes you almost stun immune, because we didn't really see many support gems being used in the trailers, right? But we know that there's like things like stunning block recovery or like reduced chance of being stunned. So potentially like you'll be able to like use those kind of gems to make the gameplay feel smoother. But yeah, in general, I mean, it's very hard to judge the gameplay from what we saw, keeping in mind that the characters were like terrible, not very well built, and they had bad gear. But if we did look at like actually Crip's Huntress game playthrough, it looked pretty good, right? Like he found a spear and it basically like doubled his damage and attack speed, and the game looked like pretty good. You know, and he got these like Herald of Thunder procs, and he would just like one shot a pack with Lightning Spear. That's when I was like, okay, if you know this game's gonna be just fine from a blaster perspective.
For me, it's like, I really love hard content. Okay, so I remember we had like some PoE leaks or patches where people going crazy because it was too hard, but I really enjoyed the challenge. I think it was like Arch Nemesis at some point and stuff like that. So I think it's like, for me personally, for my own enjoyment, it's really good because I like to progress, okay? For especially like I'm a cutting edge raider in World of Warcraft. That means you're not gonna kill the end boss of the current raid on the hardest difficulty within like 1 or 2 pulls. You know, you have to like go like at it like 200, 300, 400 pulls to get like to learn all the mechanics to just have this like perfect attempt, and then you kill it, and then the achievement pops up, and you're like, damn it, dude, we made it, right? I had the exact same situation in Diablo 4 recently on the season start. My druid was level 56, and I was doing the capstone dungeon against Elias, right? So I was like 14 levels below, and every small little ball one-shotted me. So I could have like 2 decisions. Either I say like, okay, you know what? I'm just go back. I farm more bounties like hell tides and whatnot. I just level up, and once I'm stronger, I go at it again and just fine, right? But what I did, I think it looked like 1.5 hours, like 50, 60 tries until to like perfectionize my positioning and damage output, so I was able to do it. And yes, it was super frustrating, but I know like I have the damage, I just need to like not get hit. You know, the golden rule of ARPGs, do not get hit, right? But once you finally manage to do it, you have this like, damn dude, I made it, dude, I made it. Not that I ever beat World Tier 4 at this point, but this is another story, right? And this is why I also had this thing in like Torchlight, where bosses, you know, in PoE 1, there is like, yeah, I mean, the uber pinnacle bosses, if you don't have like a build that does like, I don't know, like 500 million DPS where you just one-shot every single phase, right? But if you really have to like watch mechanics and stuff, my first Uber Elder fights, for example, that was such an epic feeling because it was not just like a map boss, you go in, you just one-shot or randomly dies, you have like a new Nico mission, you're like, wait a second, oh, the map boss was there. Where you don't even realize that something is there, unless it's like an Uber Pinnacle boss that is like super tuned and like 70% less damage taken, so you're not able, or technically not able to just one-shot them, right? So just seeing it from that perspective, I'm really looking forward to these kind of like boss fights where I really feel like this is an actual encounter. This is just not like a rare monster that I could just like forget that it existed, right? So I really want to like have this like epic feeling of like fighting a battle and then actually winning, hopefully, at some point. So yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say a thank you to Local who just rated us. So hello, everyone. Hope you're enjoying it. And now to that topic about the difficulty. Like, I gotta say, like, personally, I'm also really a big enjoyer of these, like, difficult encounters, boss encounters and all that stuff, but you always have to, like, keep in mind, like, the more casual player base, right? There needs to be some kind of, you know, like, low enough, like, you know, skill for that you need to overcome to actually not lose out on, you know, like, almost everyone playing the game, right? Because we are taking this from, like, a real, like, blaster perspective here, that everyone has like experience of like either making good builds like Palsteron, so he doesn't need to be good, or you know, it's just actually playing the game. And you know, both these things, you know, are not necessarily something that everyone does, right? So yeah, I mean, if they have like these high-end challenges, and I mean, PoE does that really well in general with like uber bosses. You know, I mean, of course, you can make builds that just like annihilate these uber bosses, but you know, for the most part, these are still challenges, right? For like the typical build, you don't just waltz through an uber encounter. So yeah, I think they've done that really well in PoE 1, and they can do that again in PoE 2, but I think for like the majority of the playthrough, it still needs to be like rather accessible, rather easy, right? To like make sure that people actually get through the game and yeah, maybe have some kind of like challenging encounters, but it doesn't need to be like to the point where you just can't do it, but it could just be like slower and more difficult versus people that have more experience with the game or a better build, right? I think, for example, D4 does that relatively well right now, where, you know, the combat is not like, you know, you can't overcome those challenges, you know, like the example of mbX right now with Elias. You can either go back and farm more and come back stronger, or you can just try it again until you do it, and it may not be as fast or as efficient, but, you know, there's nothing that really stops you. So that is kind of cool, and I think PoE2 should definitely go in the same direction.
One thing that gave me confidence in this is the fact that, like, first of all, they said that they have 100 bosses you can overcome in the campaign, and they all give you permanent power on your character. Now, whether you'll have to actually go and kill them all for your each endgame character is another argument, but the whole purpose of that, I feel like, it's going to be, like, you're going to be progressing, you get through an act, you get to a hard boss, and, you know, much like games like Elden Ring, where you get to a boss and you're like, I can't beat this, I'm not strong enough, or if you're a god gamer, you can, obviously, but yeah, you'd be like, okay, but now I have all this other content that I can go do, and over year and over level, and then I come back to this and it's going to be a lot easier, right? So that is going to be how they balance that for you know, for casuals, right? Which is what I think is their approach to that. But for people like maybe like us, or like people that like to speedrun the campaign, then they'll have to do like 1/10 the amount of side content that someone more casual might have to do to progress through it.
Yeah, I just hope you can't completely just make it so you come back later and just one shot the bosses. Maybe they make it so you actually have to clear them before you get to end game. I don't know, but then they wouldn't be optional, right? So it would be kind of lame if they make all these cool bosses, right? And then you just have to kill like 20 out of 100 that are necessary, and then the optional ones you come back at like level 90 and you just literally one tap them, right? That would be kind of.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, you know, I mean, we have optional side quests that give you skill points in PoE, right? They're not exactly optional, right? You are expected to do them as you progress, and the same thing there.
I mean, if something gives permanent stats, they're never optional, right? It's like saying, oh, I don't need that Altar of Lilith because it's like int and I'm on like a barb or something. It's like, no, you just want to complete everything so you can get everything that you can get for free, right?
Exactly, and like the later content is scaled to a difficulty that expects you to have everything prior to that, you know? So you just make it harder for yourself if you don't get those power boosts at the right moment. So if you want to come back at level 90, then you're just making everything harder until level 90. And of course, like some speedrunner might do that, right? But for the most part, I guess you are expected to actually do those bosses and get those power boosts.
I mean, I'll just rush to the boss that gives me movement speed. That's all good.
I think it's like very great in my opinion, because I think if we just compare like this, how this works in like PoE 1 and Diablo 4, for example, right? In PoE, everything is item based, you can say. Every like the biggest obviously levels, and I'm not gonna talk about ascendancies and stuff. I think this is like everybody should do them, right? But I don't think it's like that damage increase if you go from like level 90 to level 95. It is a damage increase because some of these skill points that you get, maybe you unlock another like notable and stuff like that, right? But overall, nothing will give you more damage increase than like a weapon upgrade or something. On the other hand, in Diablo 4, I feel like there is so many like things that you can do which is not gear dependent and gives you power levels, you know? So as I said, in PoE 1, I know I need this weapon upgrade, then my damage will be like 5 times higher than it is right now. But in Diablo, it's like with the Paragon system, for example, with all this like stuff, the Paragon boards, for example, the Shrines of Lilith, all these kind of things, they all play together. And it's not like, hey, if I want to up my damage, I need item upgrades. No, you can just do other things that also will give you a tremendous amount of power, especially when it comes to like Paragon points and stuff like that. So I know if I just go out and level and play the content, I don't necessarily have to find item upgrades to get like a way more powerful character out of it. So I really like the idea that in Path of Exile 2, they're going to have like these one unique monster per zone or something that gives you like permanent upgrades. But it also means that you have to farm them, right? So for some people, especially in Diablo 4, I'm currently on the Paragon grind. So I finished like 4 out of 5 zones, going into every dungeon or doing side quests, and I'm kind of like, man, actually I just want to play Nightmare dungeons, but I'm missing 4 Paragon points here, 4 Paragon points there from this zone, you know. So I kind of feel like once you go into mapping, and it's not like in PoE1 where you just say like, hey, I buy this upgrade now, I'm doing way more damage now, I can go from tier 5 maps to tier 12 maps, maybe I can do my first high tier maps, you know. It's still gonna be there, and you know you kind of have to do it. So how bad is it gonna be at some point when you like skip the majority and then go back and farm every single zone to find this one unique monster is a lot of time effort. So it's also like pro and cons in that case, right? But I really like the idea that we have multiple sources of power gain besides just equipment.
Yeah. There's probably going to be like some optimal path, you know, that we'll find like, okay, do this first and the second here. And, you know, it's like kind of like as you progress through the acts, etc. Right? But if you actually have the option, like a little bit like in D4, I guess PoE2 is not going to be like as open in like the types of content that you can choose to do at certain moments, right? But if it's like, okay, you have like the option to go like in one out of those 10 different side zones to do this first, and then you come back to this one and to this one. And maybe some of them actually have like overlapping rewards where, okay, you need to do one out of those 3 and one of those 3 or something. And then you have like everything gathered in the end without actually completing 100% of the content, but you know, like half of it or so. I think that would also be like a relatively good system so that it doesn't stay like, it's not like always the same story that you play through, right? I think this is also like, for example, what what D4 tried to do with the renown system, right? You can go in different dungeons, you can do different quests every single time you do a character or every single time you start a season, and it kind of keeps it a bit fresh, versus PoE where you always have to play through the campaign in exactly the same order. So
I think thinking about it more, I kind of agree with you, right? Because for example, let's say there's 100 bosses and they all give like permanent stats. For example, what we saw is +10 spirit and +10 fire res, right? That's what we saw. I'm guessing there's stuff like +5 movement speed, +10 cold res, lightning res, maybe +5 chaos res and whatnot. So it's actually kind of a cool idea, as you just said, that racers will have to figure out, okay, so 14 of these bosses are worth it to do while you go. You're definitely going to grab the movement speed. Maybe there's like later a boss that where you really want that extra 5% chaos res, so you take that along the way, and the rest you do later because you don't need them. So there's also a strat to that in a sense. So that's actually kind of cool because they don't just give a passive point, right? They give specific things.
yes.
My only concern is what that's gonna feel like on alts and stuff, right? Like will
Having
we
to do
have
it
to
over
like,
and over.
yeah. Because like if there's 100 bosses, like you know we're gonna want to do that obviously for all our characters.
Yeah.
And if before I get to maps or after I get to maps, I'm like, okay, I gotta go back and do 80 bosses.
And
gonna
every
feel
boss
a
is like 7
bit
minutes
weird.
fight and 2 shots you, and then the whole zone resets if you die. Good luck. So
Yeah.
I think that can lead to a lot of frustration really fast, for players. So I think they definitely have to make it at least somewhat alt friendly in some sense, right? So
Although I will say that the bosses are in every zone, right? So they are like currently there's a boss in every zone as well, but they give nothing, so you don't even notice they're there a lot of the times. But if they make it so you accidentally kill a lot of them, if you just engage with them, then I think it's fine, right? Because
yeah, if you're like on the way, basically, yeah.
Because there's gonna be no zone where you're not gonna be in, most likely.
But
so
I think the point still stands though. Like, you know, if you play like your 5th character or something, and you have like these 5-minute boss fights or something, let's just imagine it actually stays that slow and that difficult, right? Or at the very least, you're not gonna go in and just one-shot these bosses, right? But if you have like even like a 1-minute fight every single time, that's a lot of time that you just stack up in boss fights, right? And then comes the rest of the campaign. So.
But we're talking about alts, right? And on alts, you already have leveling gear, right? Which PoE is definitely going to have. So then it's also going to be easier. So maybe less frustrating. I'm just spitballing. I don't know. But yeah.
I mean, if they just make it like account bound and you have to do it once per season, for example, you have like a unique monster board, like somewhere in like hotkey, I don't know, like an overlay, right? There is like, okay, this gives you 5% movement speed, this gives you fire res, blah, blah, blah. And you do it on your first character. As we all know, like on League Start, way more hype. You're way more keen to just go into every zone and just kill all the unique packs. But then they are like, unlocked for this season. So you log on your next character, it already has all the perks that you unlocked with your main character, giving you a big power spike. And since the second time you're finishing the campaign, you know, you already have like all these like perks with like some extra damage, some extra fire resistance, making the re-leveling, the reprocessing through the campaign a lot easier. So I think that would be the
like
best. The best case scenario. One character, you just unlock everything, and then you're good to go. You log on your next character, you're gonna have the perks, and you're gonna automatically be a lot faster with all the redoing the campaign.
It
That
just
would be
sounds a
great.
little bit unfortunate, right? If they make all these cool bosses and you only kill them like once. I guess
Well,
for
once
per
per league,
season.
right? Yeah, once per
Yeah.
league.
once per
so-
league, yeah,
Once per
yeah,
league,
fair.
yeah.
I guess if you're a more casual player, that's still like enough. But yeah, I don't know. Could be.
I
Could
think
be.
I think that's good because it also gives
Yeah.
you incentive to actually go through and kill them all.
Yeah.
Because like if the progress is like every character you have to do it again, you're probably just gonna be like, yeah, I can't be. I'm talking about myself. Like it's like I can't be bothered.
Yeah,
Doing
like to me it
everything on every
sounds.
character.
Yeah, to me it sounds like, with the new campaign and all these like bosses you have to defeat, it's actually going to be a longer like early game than we have currently in PoE 1, right? Like, fast players, they can do like the campaign in like 4 or 5 hours or something, it's like a good time. And, like more casual players, they need like an entire day, they need like 10 hours, 15 hours or something, even longer than that. They play like an entire weekend to just get through the campaign, right? And it sounds like PoE 2 being a slower game and having all this stuff, it's just gonna like turn them off real fast, I think.
Yeah.
If you have to do this every single time.
I know a lot of people that would really like to play more than 1 or 2 builds per league.
Yeah.
But if they think about like, they're not like playing 10 hours a day, right? They have like, let's say 2 hours every day on the evening after work, for example, right? So you multiply that by 7, so you have like a 14 hours. So if they say, Palsteron made a new cool build and it's a Marauder base type, and I leak started a Witch, they know if I want to play Palsteron's build, I need an entire week to get through the campaign. So this like leveling, this redoing the campaign, these kind of like product of like, I want to play a new character, and it takes so long to get to the point where I actually can have fun with it. Because honestly, after playing the campaign for like 20, 30, 40, or even upwards 100 times, it's not fun anymore. It's just repetitive, and you have to do it, so you just do it on like auto tune, right? But this keeps people from actually experiencing Path of Exile in a good way. Trying out different builds, trying out different classes and characters and ascendancies and all these kind of perks, but they just don't want to, or they don't have the time simply because it's such a grindy game. And if they could make that kind of like faster, then people would be more keen to play different builds. So that keeps people from trying the game or experiencing the game in the best way possible. Just kind of sad.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not talking about skipping the campaign entirely right here. We're just talking about bonuses, right? So I think it's like it's a good middle ground, and the devs should definitely have a think about that.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's see what they do. And what I mean, they're still like, far out from like even beta right now, right? So I'm pretty sure the devs are also aware of the potential problems and the discussions that are going on. I'm pretty sure that they're probably do something about this whole problem with like leveling alts, etc. So this has been like a very long standing topic.
Unfortunately,
yeah. Okay, I want to come back to the combat again. So in particular, the fact that you have many different abilities in PoE 2 versus in PoE 1, where usually you have like one main ability, maybe two, right? Where you have like one AoE, one single target ability, or like a totem that helps you out on the boss or something like that. So this is typically how builds work, I guess, in PoE 1. It's like a one button kind of playstyle, and it's just about figuring out how does that one button actually defeat everything, right? So that's very often how it goes, I guess. And in PoE 2, it seems like it's a lot more active. It's a lot more like back and forth, doing combos, weaving abilities together and using them for different moments, right? With like depending on the situation. So what are your thoughts on this? And how do you expect this to develop? Like especially like with like different kinds of players as well, right? Like some people may not want that. Maybe there's like the totem enjoyers, there's the minion enjoyers, there's like the bow enjoyers, and what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's probably gonna we're probably gonna press like an extra button or something. But I don't think it's gonna be drastically different because we already have like in builds we have that button or 1 to 3 buttons we only press at bosses, right? For example, Ancestral Protector, Ancestral War Chief combo, or like Wither Totem or whatever it is, right? Blade Traps to apply Wither. So it's like those were already here, the bossing skills. I think what's gonna change though is because now you can use your weapon swap and bind certain passives to your weapon swap. And that will probably mean that you will have a setup with AoE, a skill bound to that AoE, and then you will have a single target skill that is set to another set of passives, right? I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen on most builds that are not too complex, right? That's going to be like the main thing. So we're probably going to press 2 buttons, one for like rares and one for normals, That's gonna change, right? You're not just gonna tornado shot, or they're gonna try their best to not make that a reality anymore. The thing that worries me a little bit is the flasks being more reactive, because that's a lot of buttons. And for me personally, my favorite would be somewhere around like 4 to 6 buttons. But if we have to also reactively press all our flasks, that's a lot of like buttons, right? For example, I think was it 3.16, 3.17, whenever they automated flasks, right? With instilling orbs, that was a huge deal. That was huge, right? Like that's 4 less buttons that I have to piano around. And having those come back and having to press them at the right time, on top of now having more skills, would probably be at least a learning curve, I would say, and maybe not what I would prefer. But I don't think that's what it's going to be. I don't think they're going to go that extreme.
Yeah, there's no way we're
There's
gonna
no
be
way.
pressing
Yeah.
like 6 buttons. I think so. For example, I do believe that we're not gonna be having like 1-button builds, and the design right now is gonna be set out to be like, we definitely want you to have like a clear and single target ability. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a good thing actually, because I don't know, like it enables you to do like some crazy wacky stuff. Like I remember like I don't know, back in Metamorph League, for example, I was playing like a fireball build with Sire of Shards, but there's no way that I could actually deal any sort of single target with that. So I would like actually weapon swap. It was like a super goofy build, but you know, like, but PoE2 is gonna basically enable that to be an actual thing.
Tuna was already playing PoE2 a long time ago, man. Nice.
But I mean, PoE2 is gonna streamline that, and it's gonna make it like really good, and you won't even have to weapon swap for that kind of stuff, because you'll just have like a separate setup for it, right? But if you do eventually want to actually weapon swap, that enables you to open like to use certain uniques that you might not otherwise ever want to use, because it's like that just makes my single target horrible, even though it makes your clear amazing, right?
Yeah, it also makes stuff like projectile speed and area of effect nodes, right? Like for example, right now, if you pick up all the AoE nodes on the build, that's like maybe 10 points or something. That could be 40% more damage, and you kind of feel bad about it. And now you can allocate them to like offhand, like your weapon swap, right? That's crazy. That's a game changer, and that's gonna be actually very difficult to build around. So it's introducing more complexity, but I think it's a beautiful solution, honestly. Yeah.
It's cool. And at its worst, it could just be like, oh, you weapon swap to shield charge, right? Which is already really cool, because it's automatic. You just click it, and all of a sudden your character is just shield charging or something. You know, whether shield charge is going to be in the game or not, who knows? But yeah, I mean, either way, it's cool.
I think it comes down to the entire scaling thingy. If I need, let's say an encounter takes a minute, okay? And if I'm 5 seconds slower with just hammering one button, I'm going that way. I promise you. If it's like a minute faster, let's say the encounter is 2 minutes, and with pressing one button it takes 2 minutes, with pressing multiple buttons it's 1 minute, then obviously we have to do it, right? So I think it all comes down to the scaling and to the build kind of thingy. I think with a reactive flask playstyle, which is weird for me, because in World of Warcraft it's an MMO, right? So I have like 50 hotkeys assigned to everything. I get a debuff, I press my defensive, it's completely natural, right? So it's actually cheating for me to say like, hey, I don't think that I have a problem with that. But even though playing an MMO in one hand, which I have to like piano the entire keyboard, when I log into Path of Exile, I almost exclusively play one button builds. Because it's a different game, it's an ARPG. I want to open my map, I want to kill thousands of monsters with one press of button and be like, hey, this build is cool, you know? So I think it's gonna be different. And it's still like we have like 9 skill slots or something, or potential 6 was it 8? I can't remember.
I think 9, yeah.
9.
Yeah, but in the end of the day, we already have like 6 or so. Or no, wait, yeah, depends. Like helmet, gloves. We have our 4 set, falling, maybe double 3 link and stuff like that. So we have already a lot of setups built in. Whether it's a cast when image taken setup, whether it's a cast on cast or cast on shock setup, you know, I don't think we're gonna have like separate 9 buttons that we all time gonna press. And there is also like one setup will be auras, for example. One setup will be, for example, a sponsor said maybe an offensive totem. That will be one extra button to press that you would usually only press if there's a rare pack, a unique monster, or a map boss. I don't think you're gonna press your totem on every single white monster that comes your way, unless you play you play totem build, which is your main attack, right? So I don't think it's gonna be that crazy. I think it comes down to pressing like 2 or 3 buttons. You know what we have. in PoE1 as well for certain builds, because most of the builds are 1 button or maybe 2 buttons, you know. But then you have your movement skill, which just takes also like 1 skill slot, and we are used to pressing movement skills anyways. You know, now we have like the roll as well. So in that case, I think they try to bring it complicated, but at the end of the day, with thinking about an aura setup, a cast damage taking setup, a movement skill setup, so there is not gonna be too much left. And when you say like, oh, we can have a separate curse setup, we have this now as well. And we know that hand casting a curse is a lot stronger than actually having a ring with like that procs a curse on hit, right? We still take the curse on hit ring because it's one less button to press.
Comfortable.
You know?
Yeah, it's
exactly.
more comfortable. And
we don't
another
care
thing
about the damage gain. Yeah.
Another thing on top of that is I feel like people often overestimate how many buttons you can actually press. Like in a game like PoE1, where there's no cooldowns, every actual other ability you press takes away from your damage window from your main skill, right? So if you're like the person who puts Val Righteous Fire into every single one of your POBs, right? And you have all these other passive skills that make your main skill better. You also have to understand that takes time to set up, right? And maybe your totem dies in between and stuff like that. And that all takes away from you actually like dealing damage, right? So there's also that to be said for example, just stacking more auras and more spirits. So just the build being more comfortable, I think, is a big thing, especially for people who play, I don't know, a lot, right? That is a big thing in PoE. Like MB just said with the curse setup. Like if I had to curse every single pack, I mean, my wrist would be gonzo, right?
Yeah.
So
it depends. Like it's based on the build, you know. If you play Hex Blast, you kind of want to manually cast because you need the Doom to do extra damage, right? But I think like the only build that I ever played that comes close to this kind of like theory of pressing so many buttons would be like Earthshatter, because you have like a lot of like war cries that you're like tunneling and then you let your things explode. There was really because how many buttons do we have? We have like 5 on the bottom side, and you have like your right click, your middle click, and your movement like left click, right? So this is already kind of like 8 buttons, but on Earthshatter I had like not enough. And I was like putting away one of the war cries, even though it was a massive damage gain, but I just didn't have enough buttons left to actually use them, right? So but it still didn't feel bad for somebody that is used to play like 1 button build. I played the complete opposite, like all the buttons in the game basically to press if you want to do damage, right? But it was like I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed it because it was different, you know. I don't say it's bad, and if I could decide, I would still play the 1 button build, but it was still like interesting overall. So I'm not even scared at all at these like changes, because in the end, it's up to us what we're gonna do with it. And if we are lazy, then we surely can make a lazy 9 skill setup, right?
I mean, I could just talk for myself. When I heard that I have to press more buttons, I was pretty defensive about it. And I was like, I don't want to, right? But at the end of the day, like I've been playing PoE just for too long. Like having to adapt to stuff is, I think, gonna be healthy, and that's a good thing, right? Like I think PoE has made me weak over the years. So
Palsteron is just gonna like sit more in PoE in PoE2, and you're gonna try to figure out your 1 button builds, I guess, and then everything's good.
While everybody's playing PoE2 beta, I'm just gonna live in Elden Ring. It's gonna be fun. Yeah.
I will never forget.
That's gonna be my training arc. Yeah.
I will never forget this one day, because I'm an Acid Drain Contagion lover, right? And this is a 2 button build, if you like it or not. And then the league came where they introduced Spellslinger, and I'm like, can I just play Acid Drain Contagion with pressing 1 button? That was mind blowing. It was so fucking good. Like really, there was like so much enjoyment there. 1 less button to press. Let's go.
Yeah.
As long as the gameplay's good, that's all that matters, right? Like, let's be honest. Like, you'd be okay with pressing buttons if they were like, if it felt good to press them.
But one thing, I guess, I don't know how you guys feel about this in the RPGs. I feel like it almost never works. These skills that are only there to reposition or like freeze or stun, like they showed with the monk, right? That skill that does like no damage, but it like pushes back enemies. I'm just thinking that's gonna go into the toilet. That's my first. Whenever I see that in an RPG, I'm like, this is not a thing. Thanks for trying, but this is no.
Nope.
I agree. Unless there's like somehow like someone comes up with like a meta to be able to like perma stun a boss or something with like a specific skill. But even then, like if that's the case, that'll get nerfed pretty quick. So
yeah, but it definitely seemed like there was like a bit of like a systematic behind it, right? Where you don't like you don't do like the generic, okay, curse, totem, and then attack or something like that, right? But it was more like, okay, you have the meteor for the big guys, you have your spark for like, AoE everywhere, and then you have your, I don't know what else, there was like this little ultimate kind of ability, right, where you were floating with the sorcerers and stuff. And it seemed like they kind of wanted to like weave in these different abilities for different situations more than, okay, you just always have this like, press 1, 2, 3 and then right click, and then press 1, 2, 3 and right click kind of thing, right? So it's more like, okay, use that for this, use this for that. And yeah, honestly, I would be very excited to actually play such builds, honestly. Like I'm a many buttons enjoyer, I gotta say. And I do these kind of setups like in basically many games. And yeah, for me this is fine, but I'm also kind of worried about like the casual player experience there, where a lot of people, they do like those one button experiences, right? And they do want to have like their one main skill, they want to play like the meteor sorceress or something, right? And this is kind of their fantasy that they're trying to play. And I think that PoE2 seemingly having like a much stronger class fantasy than PoE1, with like, the skills kind of like, being attached to a certain class kind of, much more than it is in PoE1, I guess. Yeah, I think this is going to become very important, that people can't follow such an identity and still succeed with it, even if it's maybe not the optimal path. So like the monk in particular seemed like, the monk, you need to build your power charges with that palm, and then you spend the power charges for the big cleave, and then you have like all these other things that kind of like weave together, and it feels like if you leave out one of these puzzle pieces, it's just gonna fall apart. So that's what it seemed to me.
Knowing them, there's going to be some unique that you can find that completely invalidates that shit anyways, and you just get the charges and it's going to be fine, right? So that's we'll have to see on that. But one small thing that I love about what they did is that they put a lot of small movement into a lot of the skills, right? Like for example, you saw the sorceress do the ice comet, and she like went back a little bit while she did that, right? That's huge. For example, with a spell that's such long cast time, right? Just to reposition a little bit, like those things really matter, and I think that's gonna make the game just feel so smooth.
It's funny you think that.
Less clunky.
I feel like it's gonna be almost more clunky in many situations. Like I don't like skills that move me around. I like moving around myself, if that makes sense. And if a skill forces me into moving around, I think that's annoying. But I think one thing to note is that I don't think I don't know if you saw it like when Ziz was playing, but he was like, sometimes it doesn't move me, the comment he was saying. And I asked about that to Grimro, and that's because when you press shift, they don't move you, right?
Oh.
So you'll literally be able to just opt out of the forced movement by.
That's a good thing then, right? Yeah,
Yes.
I'm thinking. You're right, right? It's not cool if you get moved by the skill, but it's also another layer of skill, right? Because if you do use it, you can progress faster, right? Like for example, you can have that. You can get XP while you're moving, kind of deal. So I think it's only upside, but we're gonna have to get used to it, right?
I'm always already looking forward to see like the first like ward loop build in PoE2 or something. I wonder how that is gonna work.
Yeah, you'll see even crazier shit. Like talking about the spirit, it's ridiculous, right? Because they've given us all these trigger gems. I mean, Woody, you've played Torchlight Infinite, right? So you know how like the reservation system works there, where you're just able to get like cast on crit, and that reserves your mana, and then you're just casting another spell, and then when you crit, it casts it, right?
Yeah.
And you'll be able to have multiple of those, and who knows how they'll interact with each other. Whether you can have like a cast on crit setup that then triggers a cast on shock setup, that then is also triggered by like a cast on roll set. Who knows, right?
Do we know that there's gonna be cast on crit though? Because that seems a little bit too. We know, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing though you have to remember is that one of the reasons why it's so strong currently is that it overrides cast speed, which isn't going to be a thing anymore, right? Because it's actually, it triggers less the more cast speed, the longer the cast time of the skill that you would proc, right? Which I think is a good thing, because right now self cast is
Yeah, who knows really? But yeah, that makes sense, because then it introduces the fact that like you need to have cast speed as an actual stat, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good move for sure. To like for balancing reasons, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you wanted to say something, Tuna?
It does bypass certain cast times, right? So for example, Comet has a base cast time of 1 second, right? And then an additional cast time. But if you cast it yourself, you'll never be able to go below the base of 1 second. But if you put it on a cast on crit setup, for example, that's you could just like essentially like you won't have that 1 second cast time. It will have a delay in between casts, but the cast time won't be there, so you won't be locked down.
Well,
makes
that's
sense.
that's all balance stuff, right? That's all gonna be changing anyways, right? We're gonna see on release.
Yeah, who
but
knows?
I like that it's in the game. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a iconic Path of Exile thing.
With like how they are making skills, I would say more complicated a bit in PoE2. Like this comment, having like the built-in jump and all that stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they also have like targeted like kind of scaling adjustments for these kind of things, where the comment in particular, like on the skill gem, maybe even has like when triggered, it has like maybe a longer cooldown, or it has like less damage, or just for like balancing reasons. I could imagine that they're actually going to do a lot of things like that.
That's already the case in PoE1 as well. Like
Yeah,
Lion
a little
Conduit,
bit,
for example,
yeah.
just like things like that.
I would like if there's still 0 and 1 button builds though, but they can't do the hardest content, right? So for example, right now, even 1 and 0 button builds can do just everything, right? They're still the strongest builds, but you can kind of make it sort of like MF, where your character is weaker, but you have more comfiness, right? Like you can watch Netflix on the side, but you're not gonna do like highest tier of like Delirium or something, right? So that would be, I guess, a cool thing.
This is like the major problem we have in Path of Exile 1 right now, because as of right now, magic finders, like well-built magic finders, can do 100% Delhi maps.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's a big problem.
Then I see like my character, which is not magic find. I can also do the same content, but I know that a magic finder can do the same. So
and he drops more loot. So what are you even doing, right? That
yeah,
it feels
what
bad,
am I even doing? So I'm forced into magic find. Like back a couple of years ago, where magic finder was basically tied to like T3 barrel chamber farm, or tower farm, T4 tower farm. So a magic finder was kind of locked down to a low tier map, which was great because certain uniques like mage blood and stuff like that, they were only dropped from like 78 plus or something, or 75 plus, which was like tier 10 or something. So that was like the limitation. Oh, if you play Magic Find, you're forced to play low tier maps because you cannot survive anything higher. You're gonna get more currency and more item drops based on the location, maybe more div cards, but in addition to that, you will not be able to find a mage blood because that needs you to actually run high tier maps. But the problem is, as long as magic finders are able to do the same kind of content as a well-rounded beast build, you feel kind of bad for not playing magic find. And getting forced into that is kind of like a shitty situation. So I would really like to see big nerfs coming to that. And I think like they mentioned it in the podcast, or at least like in the interviews, right? Where they say like, hey, if you play magic find, you have less stats on your gear, so your character is weaker. Yeah, that's the case in Path of Exile 1 too, but we have so much power creep that we don't care about that fact, because
remove magic find, remove magic find, remove magic find, remove magic find.
Yeah, they said they're going to be changing magic find, so
I think for PoE2 they can definitely do major adjustments in that, right, with magic find, or how these stats work or whatever, right? And yeah, maybe this is kind of like some leftover from PoE1 from the early days, right, from like back in D2 when magic find was a thing and all that stuff, right? And I guess the new direction will probably look very different there, but who knows? But I totally agree with mbX that.
They talked about it a bit, actually, the magic find stuff. So just sorry to cut you off there, but the rarity is gonna basically be probably the only stat for magic find, but that will increase. Like for example, it will increase the chances of you dropping a higher tier currency. So it's like D2 more like, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So not a more loot, but it's like, better loot. And yeah.
I don't know how you can implement MF that it actually makes sense, because currently it's like you have these shitty uniques that you don't want to run, that make you slower, that like remove power. And it's just like, you make your character stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And then instead of doing harder and harder content, you do the same content, but your character is weaker. So you're just replacing all your cool items with these shitty quant items that have no stats, right? It's just, it's such, for building, for build diversity and stuff like that, it's just absolutely like crazy. Because for example, there's like, so in every slot, almost every slot, you have like quant, right? And if you have a build that needs a certain unique in that slot, you're like, okay, so you're minus 20 quantity versus every other build, right? It just stifles creativity so hard. It's just kind of stupid.
I actually agree with Palsteron. Yeah, I'm not a fan of magic finding at all. I've never done that in PoE. I've never really done that in like other games. And also to mbX's point, like if you actually reach that point of power creep where, there is literally not even a downside to magic finding, then we're really in a bad spot, right? So this is, where you really have to feel bad about playing like another build, right? Like, and this is why they have this content scaling, right? This is why Delirium exists, to give good builds some content to do that is also rewarding compared to just like farming buried chambers all day long on tier 3, right? And yeah, if there's like some space for it where it's like somewhat balanced and people really like magic finding, okay, but right now this does not seem to be a case, and they have to be careful with that, I guess, going forward as well, with what kind of magic find they introduce and how powerful you're gonna be and what kind of content you can do with that.
I agree. It
I
should
think
be
it's
tied
fine.
to rarity, right? Like, sorry, to difficulty, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the more difficult content you do, the more magic you find.
Yeah.
The stronger you are, the more rewards. Or put it on the Atlas passive tree within your progression, like they do already, right? With like quant nodes and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, or just give like those passive perks to certain unique monsters in the campaign, where you get like permanently unlock rarity, quantity, and stuff like that, movement speed, whatever. So, but then it also comes back to the point where you have to do that. You have to do optional content, right? And I already know like content creators or people are asking like, "Yo, can I play this build without killing all the 100 uniques there?" And it's gonna be the classic,
Yeah.
Shit. Oh
be-
man, I just thought about it. It's like, which bandits do you kill? And it's gonna be like, which 100 bosses do you kill? Now it's like, oh,
Yeah,
here's
you have to provide your entire list now. Like, okay,
it's like
And
a
here's the
shopping
most
list,
efficient
dude.
pathing, yeah.
No.
yeah,
It's gonna be
good
OP.
luck to the build makers there. Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay. One other topic I would like to talk about is the classes. So they have doubled, well, almost, right? Zion is gone, but we have 12 classes now in PoE2. And they said that basically there's like 2 classes for each combination of stats, right? So this is like the baseline. And well, what are your thoughts about the new classes? Like, how do you think they fit in? Like, they're all gonna have their ascendancies as well, so there's probably gonna be a lot of different build opportunities. But from my perspective, it also seems like what I mentioned earlier. I think they're trying to build much stronger class identities with like much stronger, like attachment to certain skills, for example, versus in PoE1 where it's like much more open, I feel. So, what are your thoughts on that? And who wants to start?
I like more choice, but when they announced it, I was just they said that they want to be more accepting to new players, right? And then I'm just thinking about a new player opening the game and having like 12 classes there, right? And having to choose from them. So I'm not sure if it's like not just super intimidating from the get-go, but I like more choices. It means more ascendancies. It means like everything where you can make mistakes for me is cool, because then you have something to learn, right? But
and something to make videos about, yeah.
And something to make videos about, yeah. But at the same time, if they have 2 character classes, for example, for dexterity, right, they also have to make them different enough, right? For example, the Huntress and the Ranger, as ascendancies are right now, a lot of them are just like basic stuff. Like you can be a Deadeye and you can be a spellcaster at the same time, even though it's like a bow class, right? You can be a Pathfinder and you can basically be everything. So it's very broad, right? So they will have to make these ascendancies a lot more specialized. Which if they can pull it off, it's going to be cool. It's going to kind of like feel like you're a huntress and not just like, oh, I'm going to pick this ascendancy. It doesn't make any sense, but it just has the best passive bonuses, right?
I agree with that, yeah. But on the other hand, I heard that they're gonna introduce Druid, which I really like, because in one hand they always had like, yo, shapeshifting, but like years ago, I think in like Exilecon 1 when they showed their first like trailers, there was like this one like 3 seconds clip where there was like a character like transforming into a wolf and like jumping into a pack, and then the next clip started, but this was like, wait, we get shapeshifting. But from this idea of shapeshifting, since Exilecon we know there's gonna be Druid as a class. I played Druid in Diablo 2, I played Druid in Diablo 4, I played Druid in World of Warcraft, so guess what? I'm gonna play Druid in PoE2 as well, and I don't really care how bad this is, I'm still gonna play it, but I'm looking forward to it. But, it's always like this, you can't even call it balancing act, because, you want to make it, more casual friendly, but on the other hand, here take, even more classes and more ascendancies to play
36 subclasses, right?
Yeah, this is actually just crazy. And even for us that are many in the chat as well that have like so many freaking hours in the game and played so many different leagues, and even for me as like somebody that really likes to try out all kinds of variations of builds, there is still so many ascendancies that I have never really played. I think in all the years I have like one single Guardian build, because Templar I just don't like the model, so I'm usually staying away from that, right? But I'm just not a fan of any form of minion playstyle or any trapper miner. I've never played a saboteur up to this day, even though I have like 13,000 hours. You know, there's so many things in Path of Exile 1 that I've just haven't tried yet, you know? So thinking about there's even gonna be more and more and more and more things, and I'm like, bro.
Well, yeah,
hey,
you have 1.5 years left to
crazy.
finish your list, yeah? Then
Yeah, it's actually crazy. I know that Druid is a login for me, you know? And then we're gonna see where we go from there. But yeah, it's gonna be crazy.
That's a good thing about PoE though, right? It's like, so you're a furry, so you can be a furry and specialize in that. But maybe somebody else has like the muscle man fantasy and you can specialize in that, right?
Yep.
But like, I mean, like, that's cool. I think it's fine for new players to just like learn one thing at a time and specialize. And I think that's one of the cool things about PoE. You just go one step at a time. People say like the difficulty of the game is like insane. There's so much complexity and whatnot. But if you just like focus one thing at a time, and break things down like one league at a time, eventually you'll become proficient with the game. And that's kind of like the cool thing about it. Or you'll find your preference. Like you can be like the guy that plays TS for the 26th league in a row, right? Shout out to our friend Grimro. You know, but like for you know, that's PoE. It's fine to just be like, I'm a ranger. I play that shit. I mean, much like Woody as well. You like playing rogue, right? So you just play rogue.
I mean,
For
I
the
do
most
play
part,
other
of course,
classes
you're
now,
doing
right?
other stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
But like your preference would always be like,
Yeah,
you see
of
the new
course.
game, and you're like, yo.
Yeah, of course.
Like
I like the
class
agile,
fantasy.
fast classes, you know, like for me, Huntress, Ranger, you know, these kind of things. So this is just how it goes for me. And
sure.
yeah, I'm like a bow enjoyer. But yeah, like one thing that I think is gonna happen with PoE2 though is that we're not gonna see like these, at least not at the start, I believe. We're not gonna see this insane builds that, you know, you play like some kind of like spell casting berserker or something like that. I think it's gonna be a lot more streamlined where, okay, I mean, it's already like how PoE1 has moved in that direction, I think, as well in like the last years, where, you know, you don't like just pick like some random ascendancy and then like start stacking some really weird stuff that goes in a completely opposite direction. I think that with 36 different ascendancy classes, you know, it's gonna be like very straightforward to like pick one of them basically, and you say, okay, I want to play a Huntress with that ascendancy, and it kind of like naturally pushes you in the right direction with like, you know, the skills you use, the stats you use, and all that stuff, much more than it does now already. So that might actually be one way for them to reduce complexity, despite having all these different choices with the many different classes and then the different ascendancies. As long as you kind of like decide which one you want to do, I think it's kind of like end up in the right place somewhere. I think just following that route that is like laid out for you. So it's like, I think from my perspective, it's gonna feel like maybe with like there will be like less creativity involved, but it's gonna feel more streamlined, and this also allows them to do like way better balancing, I believe, long term. So that's probably like one of the goals there.
You also got to remember that there's not going to be a gem vendor anymore, right? So if you start as a huntress, you're given a certain, like from quest rewards, you're given gems, right? But the devs tell you how to play the huntress basically, and you have a different experience than if you play, I don't know, berserker or whatever there will be, right? And that's a good thing, right? That's a different way to play the game as well. That's also class identity. It doesn't just have to be subclasses. It can just be the first 60 levels or so are going to be different. That's already, like, for a lot of people, that's already class identity, right? I just hope again, it's a weird thing, right? Because if the subclasses are too specified, right? For example, the necromancer in PoE was always until he got nerfed was always a good thing where minion players would just go necromancer, right? There wasn't really much to think about, but also it's a really good class identity, right? That makes sense. Necromancer minions. So it's kind of has to be balanced where it's not too obvious, so you still have choice, but you still have that identity. So I don't know how you would balance that. I hope they can find like a good middle ground there.
I think we're absolutely going to see a lot more specialization on the ascendancies. I think they have to do that, because if you keep the ascendancies as generic as they are now, and they're already quite specialized, but they're still like generic enough to the point where, you know, we see like, you know, bow champions and, you know, we see like these spellcasting berserkers and stuff like that. And I kind of have the feeling that going forward with 36 different ascendancies, they need to specialize them with their own mechanics, with their own, like, you know, do this and do that kind of thing. That, yeah, you're gonna have, like, you know, maybe the choice between, like, you know, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, maybe up to 10 different main skills for each of those ascendancies, and then a few supporting things that kind of go in a similar direction, and that's probably it, I think.
I still hope they keep like the PoE thing where you have like a witch that's like a melee character, right? Like the witch that slams a hammer on the ground, or like the sword animation of the witch, right? Which is very iconic. I hope they keep stuff like that in the game as well, because I always like the idea of being able to
Yeah,
just
I mean,
mix and match.
doing the crazy stuff is what PoE is known for, right? So the ability to be able to do that, even if it's not necessarily the most effective, that is like really the big thing there. I think mbX wanted to say something.
Yeah, it's basically getting back to the point about experience and knowing the game. So it's gonna be completely awkward in the start where everybody starts fresh and we have like, what am I going to do? I saw a video with like the javelin thrown with the lightning, so I guess I go huntress, right? Because like dexterity, javelin, and stuff, like it makes sense. So we're gonna pick that, right? But like in 2 or 3 or 4 years from that point of release, a lot of things have been figured out already, so we only have to adapt to the new league stuff, to the new support gym stuff, instead of like the entire package. So at some point, we gotta figure out like almost like 90% of the usual or common builds, what ascendancies are best for each set of skill. And then we go back to the roots of PoE, I would assume, because at some point, I don't think a lot of people would have... That's like weird, just trying to figure out like one skill that is like completely off, for example, where you say like, hey, I'm gonna play Berserker, a wonder character as Berserk, which turns out to be like the best form because it's like an attacking, but you still need like 250 intelligence to wield a wand as a Berserk instead of like a big ass weapon, you know? So in the end of the day, we're gonna figure out the core, we as a community basically, and then we're gonna adapt from there and figure out other ways of playing PoE as we know that PoE is so good at, you know. So it's gonna be crazy in the start, but it's gonna chill down, I think, at some point when we know. So basically, pick a skill, and then you're gonna get like, oh, you wanna play this skill, this ascendancy is yours, you know. You wanna play this skill, this ascendancy is yours, or this or that ascendancy because X, Y, C, but none of the others are actually getting into point because they're just like not really in favor of whatever you want to do, you know?
Yeah, I think from a casual player perspective, you're probably not necessarily thinking too much about a specific skill when you choose what to play. I think it's more like, you know, you load up the game, you have no idea about the game, you have no idea about the patch or whatever, right? And then you create your first character and you're like, there's like 12 different options now. Okay, I really want to go druid. And then of course you kind of expect there are some things that push you in the direction of a druid, right? So there are the shapeshifting skills, there are some nature magic skills and whatever, right? And you just kind of like you kind of like learn about them and explore the game as you go. Versus, you know, okay, you have this one skill and then you can play like those 3 ascendancies of that kind of comfortably and you know, reasonably, and that's it. So I'm not sure where's the starting point for most players, but it's probably the class itself.
Yeah, it's probably good that it's like, in that sense, it's probably good that it's more specific. I just hope that, for example, if there's like a shape-shifting ascendancy, right, that for new players, that is a really nice way to go, like a really nice pre-built pattern, right? But there's also like this weird-ass, I don't know, witch that is really good because of how a certain shape-shifting skill works. And there's like an ascendancy point that's kind of weird and that works with it, right? That's the sort of thing that I would like, where you can still branch off, but you have this like path for new players, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd always rather have them be more generic, right, than specific. I do agree that, like, you know, the shape-shifting class should be more leaning towards shape-shifting, but what you can do with shape-shifting should be more generic in the sense that like you know how you use shape-shifting. You know, it's kind of like champion, right? Like champion, like fortify is more for melee, but like you can use fortify on other things, and then it has like adrenaline and how we use adrenaline. It's like I really like the generic aspect to current Path of Exile ascendancies, and I wish they don't go towards the restrictive side of things.
I think like it's based on which kind of player you are, because I can definitely see, Woody, when you say like, hey, I'm playing druid in every single game, and if Path of Exile 2 offers me a druid, I'm gonna picking that, and I'm gonna see then afterwards what skills I can play with that kind of druid. I think It's also gonna be the opposite that people are like, I'm playing melee every single game. I'm playing caster every single game, you know? So if I say like, hey, every game I play, I want to play like a caster, I want to play a mage, I want to shoot out my fireballs, and obviously I'm gonna pick it based on like being a caster, so I'm obviously gonna play like some form of like caster in the login screen. I'm not gonna pick like any warrior if I say, hey, my intention is to cast fireballs, you know? So I think it's like just based on like player experience, what kind of like thing, if they want to go with the lore, if they want to go with the class identity, or if they want to go with a certain play style or with certain skills, like, hey, I'm fire mage or whatever, so I want to do like meteors and then fireballs and those kind of things, you know? So but I can definitely see the 12 characters, base characters is crazy. I always like imagine this like Diablo 2 login screen where, you know, where there's a campfire and there's like your 5 characters,
There's like
and you
12.
can like click on that, you know, you have like a freaking army of characters around you, like
It's gonna be like a
what am I doing
round
here, you know?
It's gonna be a round table, right? Like of knights. That's what it's gonna be.
Yeah, like, I mean, 12 classes is insane, honestly. Like,
That's
you know,
a
just
lot.
like as a base game, right? I mean, they're probably not gonna add more classes, I imagine. Like 12 is already like a massive number, but it's kind of crazy to just hear that number, right? And imagine that this is what you're choosing from.
Yeah,
So
You definitely won't be overwhelmed in early game though. They won't show you the 12 classes. I feel like Path of Exile does it really well, where like you have like a present or a box and you open it, and you look inside and there's another one. You're like, oh. Then you like open that and you look inside and there's another one. And that's
Yeah.
kind of like how they're gonna like present it, right? Like you log in, you have your witch, and then you ascend. You're like, what the hell is this? And that's like the second layer. And then you
Yeah.
open your passive tree, and it's like more and more and more and more layers get introduced over time.
Yeah, in that sense, our ascendancies are pretty smart, because imagine if at the start when you click on witch, you already see the 3 ascendancies, right? It would obviously be good for knowing what's going on or what's going to come later, but it's way too intimidating, right?
For sure.
okay, how would you see if they would make like a sub tree? So you say like instead of 12 characters, you have 6 characters to pick off, right? So let's assume you're picking the witch, you know? And at level 10, you can decide to be either a wizard or a warlock. And then the wizard is 3 wizard ascendancies, and the warlock has 3 warlock ascendancies. So you go like always like down, you know? So you have like sub creation,
mean-
because then you at least you have like only 6 characters to pick in the start. If
Yeah,
you say,
but now
'cause-
you have to. How do you call the character that you pick at the start, where you then have to decide? So now
Oh,
you're
magic
introducing
guy.
another character, right?
Yeah,
Magical,
I mean-
magical guy, right? That's then gonna turn into a warlock or into your elementalist or whatever, right? And then you have to go ascendant. I think that's even more complicated, honestly.
the thing is, like, you just want to have like an easier way of picking your starting point, but then like a more in-depth way of what you could do with it technically. Because as I said, like if we have like 2 classes per like hybrid stat variety, you know, if I say I'm new to Path of Exile, I love bow builds. In whatever game I play, I want to play a bow build. So there is like I already have to pick between 2 specs or classes, which is like Huntress
No,
and
it's
Raider.
ranger. Ranger
Oh.
is bow. Ranger's Huntress is spear.
Spears.
Yeah, they are focusing. That's why they.
Yeah.
Who's
introduced new
using a
classes.
crossbow then? Is that not Huntress as well?
I think that's Ranger.
the
It's probably gonna
mercenary
be
as
Ranger.
well.
Yeah.
No, isn't it the
Oh,
mercenary?
mercenary. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
So we have like
duelist.
3 already. So we have
Mercenary.
like 3 types
Yeah.
of like ranged
Yeah.
combat: a bow, a javelin, and a crossbow. And I have already
Yeah.
3 different classes to pick in the start. I'm like, this is mind blowing, dude. What? Give me some help here. Give me one class where I say this is a dexterity character. This is like you know, bow character, ranger character, or is favored of using ranged physical weapons or something like that.
But
you know? And I
mercenary is
know,
strength. But mercenary is strength dex, right? So it's not the same. So because you need a little bit of arm strength to hold that crossbow, right? So it makes sense.
that totally makes sense. A crossbow
go.
is heavy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what if you
Well,
play your bow character and at one point you say like, dude, I would like to have a crossbow. Because in Diablo
can
2,
do
you just
that.
equip the crossbow, you know, because it's then like the same stats as like.
Bro,
I
it's
don't know,
PoE.
like-
You'll be able to do whatever you want. And
I
I think
guess so,
like
yeah.
PoE has always done a great job at this, where like I really don't want them to go more into the restrictive side of things. But if you look at ascendancies now, they have like 2 or 3 nodes that are very specific to a certain type of playstyle. Like if you look at like the ranger, it's like far shot, right? Like far shot. Deadeye is like very specific to only works with projectile attacks, and you know it has also like a thing that says like barrage does not spread, right? So it has like a very specific thing, but all of the other nodes, well, maybe not all of them, but like if you hover over some of the other nodes, they're more generic. Like they say, like skills fire additional projectiles, or skills chain, or you just gain gale winds, gathering winds, right? So as long as there's like enough points that are sort of like more generic and can apply to different types of playstyle, but then also has some sort of class identity nodes where you're like only works with spears or only works with crossbows and does enhance them in a certain way, that's totally fine. I think that's definitely the design that I see them like keeping, because that's one of the most and best things about Path of Exile. Of course, they fall short on it sometimes, like the new chieftain rework, or like yeah. So, but I mean, like they're always gonna be like changing things and experimenting with things, and players will always find the best thing. But as long as they have like a few generic nodes tied in with a few specific nodes, I think you'll be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, on what ascendancy you want, as long as it's not totally like using spells on a marauder kind of thing.
Which you can still do if you want to.
Yeah, sure, but it'll be like scuffed because you start in the strength area and there's nothing that really reinforces it, unless you want to go for like a fizz, fire or something like it's very niche specific things like that, right?
Yeah,
Remember,
until
like
until you have those
CI
uniques, right, where you can like use your strength to your advantage for spell casting and stuff, and then things get real crazy. So that's where they can open up a lot of these things, I guess, late game especially, like make it like less complicated for the newcomers, but then late game like crazy uniques, you can do that, right? So
yeah, or even keystones, like for example, Iron Will like makes all your strength damage bonuses apply to spell damage. So that totally enables new ways to play different classes and ascendancies and whatnot. But of course, there should always be an obvious choice as to like, if you're playing spells, you should play a witch. But then for some, like after a while, like you graduate past that thought and that way of thinking in Path of Exile, where you're like, well, now I'm not really tied down to one ascendancy. I can just basically play whatever I want on whatever class I want, as long as there's a reasoning behind it and there's synergies.
I guess the way you can also balance that is through uniques, right? Like endgame uniques that give you a new way to play a certain class. So something like Iron Will that makes you wanna do a spellcaster on a strength-based class. You could easily transform stuff with like uniques later and still make the classes more specific. So at the start, it's more clear where to go.
I agree.
Like for example, Volker's guidance, right? Where you can poison with lightning, cold, or fire skills, depending on which version you have, right? That's a very weird thing, and it can be good because it has certain scaling vectors or whatever. But that's way too complicated for a new player. But then all of a sudden you're using, you can be like Spark, but you can be Poison, right? So it's like, yeah. I think unique items would also be a good way to solve that.
And this is exactly what I meant with like this experience thing, that in the start it's gonna be like a bit chaotic, but after a while you figure out everything, and in like 2-3 years from now, or at least after the release, we're gonna figure out every single way of playing Fireball and like every single set, and see if it makes like somewhat sense, or if there's a unique that makes sense. So yeah, it's gonna be a great ride, I guess, along the way, as always.
Yeah, since you're on the topic of items and uniques already anyway, I wanted to talk about itemization and crafting. Like we highlighted already earlier that, like stuff is like more rare and you don't really have like so many good items in the early game from the previous that we've seen at least, and like the crafting materials are, like crafting currencies are more infrequent, and some of them have also been removed. The crafting bench is removed. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it good that they're like kind of like streamlining this a bit and making item progression maybe like more about actually finding the items, and then less about like this whole like crazy meta crafting and all these like different like currencies that we have and the different league mechanics? Essences seem to be nowhere to be found, for example. So what are your thoughts on that?
I guess
could I start, because I'm
let's
out
go
of
for
coffee
it.
and I would really like to
do it. Yeah, do it.
Basically, I'm a bit scared, especially when it comes to like the crafting bench, because I remember this Delph event that we had where there was no crafting bench, and it was the first time I experienced this kind of like not having a crafting bench and how terrible it was, because you had like this 4 modded item and like life and like 2 resistance types and like armor or something, and I'm just gonna slap fire resistance on and I have a pretty good item, but there is no crafting bench. What also means no crafting bench means no meta mods. No suffix cannot be changed, no prefix cannot be changed, maybe no flask enchantments, like whatever has to do with the crafting bench is not going to be there. So I'm wondering, yes, I can see the sense of like grabbing an item with a new Chaos Orb that is basically a new Exalt in the same thing, right? Where you say like, hey, I have a good item, has 3 good mods, but 1 is bad, so I could technically, I just YOLO the Chaos Orb, maybe I can make the bad stat into a good stat, I have a very good pair of boots, right? But when it comes to like end game, when it comes to mirror tier crafting, when it comes to getting the highest and craziest, best, strongest items in the game, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Because obviously, as we know, every item is based on item level for the mods, you know, like if you drop like in Act 3 some pair of boots, they can never be like the best boots because they're not able to roll a T1 life roll because it needs a certain item level. But in the end of the day, without crafting bench, without meta mods, I'm so curious how you are able to get like the finest items in PoE. In one hand, I really like this kind of sense because having like a 6 times T1 item should be like a one of a kind, should be like insanely crazy, you know? That's why I kind of disliked Harvest League back in the day, because you could just create your character in Path of Building, and you could replicate 1-to-1 this character in-game in a matter of time, because you know it's just a matter of time until I finish the 6 times perfectly rolled T1 item, you know? Obviously for casual players, it's better, because you get, with a lot less currency, you get super, super strong items. But without Harvest, a 6 times T1 item is like mind-blowing, because if you ever try to roll like the 3 times physical damage on a weapon, for example, it's almost impossible. I don't know, like 500,000 alterations if you want to go, or like Chaos Orbs if you want to like spam it away or something, or even like more than 2 million or something. It's like, it's almost impossible. So if somebody gets like this one item where it says like, hey, this item comes with like 4 T1 modifiers, you know, and 1 T3, and I'm able to get like a Chaos Orb on it, and I remove this 1 Tier 3 and get another, like, you know, like, I think having like such insanely powerful items should be one of a kind. There should be maybe like 5, 6, maybe 10 items per league, where people are getting so lucky that they should rather play the lottery instead of like Path of Exile, and not like mass, like the way we have it right now. Every single league, there is like a set of items where the top end crafters are just waiting for a certain base item to appear on the market, whether it's an explodey bow, whether it's like a +1 power charge ring with certain implicits, you know, these kind of things. They snack the market, and there is a list of all the meta builds and what items they need. So one team is working on the best in slot Righteous Fire weapon, the next one works on the chest and so on. But after like 3 or 4 weeks of the game, you every mirror tier item is basically there for you to mirror it. And this is kind of like a sad thing. Yeah. Because I would like to have the power spread amongst all people, and not spread amongst certain crafting groups that have like infinite currency, and they don't mind spending 20,000 divines on finishing 1 pair of a bow, for example, you know? Because I feel like I have no power there to just be relatively competitive. But if I know...
The thing is, what you're talking about though is that's like 0.1% stuff, right? Like, yeah. I think if we zoom out a little bit, right? The main issue for them is currently they can't make items on the ground relevant if you can just take a normal item and craft it to perfect. Those are not like why would you pick up rares? That's currently the problem. And they want to solve that by denying you to be able to do it from normal, right? That's, I think, what they want to do. They want to go with more of a last Epoch approach, where you find an item that, for example, has like 2 or 3 stats you want, and then you finish that up if you can, right? It's still going to be RNG. There's still going to be stuff. But the one thing that I agree with you that I will miss is the Reddit posts where people post like perfect items. They could still be there, but as you say, without the crafting bench, but they can still, like, crafting bench, I think in general is fine. I don't think crafting bench adds as much, thinking about it. They could still introduce meta crafts as like items later. For example, in like a league or something, right? Once the game has settled down, the balancing is done, right? Everything makes sense. They can still introduce it later. I just think currently, so when I think that the passive tree is not the main problem with complexity in PoE. I think it's actually just crafting, and the problem is crafting is itemization. It's baked into itemization, right? And if 99% of players don't want to participate or can participate in such an integral part of the game, that is almost useless for them, right? Like, that's almost not a good system. So while I love taking a normal item and like streaming for 6 hours and making like a almost perfect item. It's awesome. I also realize that for most people that is not a reality, right? So I don't know. It's hard to say. I think overall for the health of the game, it's a good change. As long as they still give us end game options, but I don't think we're gonna be as crazy as we are now. Yeah.
Definitely takes a lot of the power
That's
away
true,
from
yeah.
the casters and more to the mappers, right? Which is, I think, the most important part is, you being able to actually find things that are useful when you're mapping and actually rewarding playing the video game. I know like
Yep.
crafting is like obviously playing the video game, but like rewarding actually, killing monsters, which is what the game is all about, and making people feel less bad about like, like actually doing a map and rather than just sitting in your hideout and like playing around with rocks and orbs and stuff. I think the game is going to be better off. But I think, like, honestly, metacrafting is still going to be a thing. There's going to be currencies that are going to facilitate that in some way or another. Whether it will involve the crafting bench, we know that it won't, right? But I mean, we know that like there's going to be that sort of complexity to crafting, and honestly, the groups are still going to be there, and people are still going to make crazy stuff.
I will also,
Regardless.
by the way, sorry, I will also not miss buying crafting mats for 4 hours, right? Just on top of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Definitely
you
not.
still have to do that.
Well, we'll
if
see.
you
we'll
want to
see.
make
I
crazy
think,
items.
Wait, did they
I think
actually
what they're
mention
trying to
anything about
do-
trade? Did they talk
I think
about
they
trade?
said they're gonna. I think they said they're gonna keep it at least the same. Maybe give us some quality of life. So I don't think they're gonna try to tone it down or anything
Ah.
like that. But I think what they're trying to do tonight is make every click a little bit more interesting. Don't you think? Like just having rares on the ground, and you just have to like impact the stat. Like there's already some stats on there, right? So it's already a half finished item, and then you finish it. Is probably gonna make it more impactful per click, right?
Yeah, essentially more will happen in less, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Like if you had a chance orb that it was 10 times as rare, but had 10 times the chance, right? Sort of.
Yeah, or like rather than sitting there and spamming 2,000 alts, like
Yeah.
you'll already get like a base that's like decent enough, and then you'll add remove. But at the end of the day, it's all subject to change. We don't know anything about this
We
yet.
don't know. Yeah.
But the main thing to keep in mind is that the game is going to be totally different, and whether like right now we're sort of in the mentality of like, what am I going to do without my crafting bench? How am I going to cap my resistances and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Those are all like things that are going to be solved in one way or another, and a lot of them I suspect are going to be solved more towards like you saw, like you got like 10 fire res from killing a side boss or something, right? And we don't know yet whether we're going to get negative resistances because there's no Kitava penalty or whatever. Who knows? But I think overall they're going to be sort of streamlining more the early game so people can actually finish the campaign and then get sucked into the game. But they're not going to be removing complexity. I know that for a fact. There's no way
I
they're going to be
I
doing
don't think
that.
so. Also, like the MBX example of like Delve, I agree. I also it felt like really bad to not have the crafting bench, but you got to remember that's like PoE1 balancing, right? That's PoE1 items, PoE1 mods. So I don't think that's gonna like carry over. I think the like with such an integral part removed, they're gonna think about it, right?
Yeah, I agree with most of that as well. I think that doing less crafting but more meaningful crafting is definitely a good way. Like for example in D4 where we don't really have crafting, but there's this occultist rerolling, and you do this like very rarely. Like, it's just like so costly, you can't really do it much. But it still feels kind of good to do that once in a while. You find an item that is almost good and you can roll a better stat on it, and maybe eventually you're gonna do more systems like that where you can like change items a bit. And I think with PoE2 just like not spamming 2,000 alterations is a good move. It is not something bad. I won't miss that. I gotta say.
Yeah. I mean,
I just want to ask
be
real quick before I continue. mbX, do you have to leave? Like, how is your schedule right now?
No, it's fine. I think I can stay for like another half an hour or so.
Okay, because I know that you had to leave later,
Yeah,
so I just want to make sure. Okay.
One thing
Sorry.
I want to point out, they had this like discussion on this like ARPG Legends kind of thing where they talked about loot, right? Where one guy says, "Hey, we need so much loot that people cannot even like pick everything up," and the other one says like, "Yeah, but then they don't pick it up because the loot is trash anyways, right?" So this is like this never-ending problem that they have about, for example, when you say, "Hey, the rare items that are gonna drop are better overall," and as Palsteron said, "Hey, this only takes like maybe a couple orbs, and I could make really good boots out of that pair," there's like the difference. Let's say in PoE2, I would run a map. If there is a total of like 7 or 8 rare items dropping, I'm more keen to pick everything up and check it out, you know? Other than, hey, there is every map, there's like 100 rare items dropping, I'm not gonna pick up anything. Because the thing is like, what I like to explain to people when they ask me like, why do I never pick up rare items when I'm playing PoE1, right? Because I said like, I'm aware that I could literally find on the floor a pair of rare boots that are worth 10 divines. But in order to find that pair, I have to check probably 1,000 different rare boots because 999 of them is going to be like vendor trash to find this one. The amount of time that it takes, I'm just not going to check anything because I'm too lazy for that. So I'm kind of like scared in one hand if they make good rares drop, but therefore less common, you know, that people are like, hey, where's my loot pinata going? We had this, like, remember this one league where they stealth nerfed like 90% of the loot and all of a sudden there was nothing dropping anymore? How freaking outrageous the entire community was. Because they want to see a lot of, like, items popping up, but in the same hand, they don't want to pick it up, or in almost no cases they want to pick it up because it takes too much time. So it's so hard to, like, balance that, like good items drop, but also not too many or too...
I think the main issue with that league was that people just felt the impact of like the less currency and all that stuff as well, right?
Not just that.
It was not just the items on the ground. Like, you know, there's not many people that actually go and pick up and identify all the items on the ground, right? No one really cares. You know, that's like a major problem of PoE1. And I guess that could be solved in exactly the way you described in PoE2. Like, where there's like, you know, 5 or 10 items dropping per map and you pick them all up and you check them out because, well, that's actually like a very reasonable number of drops, I think, for like a few minutes of gameplay, right? So it's not like holding you back in that sense with like you have to spend like, you know, half an hour sifting through loot in your inventory as you progress, right? So that makes a lot of sense, I think.
But I can also see a lot of people complaining then, like, yo, Path of Exile 2 doesn't drop any items. You know, like kind of a little bit of a ruthless hype in PoE2 for making it harder and you kill less monsters.
It doesn't have to be that crazy, right? And
you know,
if there's like some, you know, some kind of like, you know, smart loot or some kind of like, you know, improvement in the loot system at least where, you know, you don't find like +2 maximum life on your level 80 item, right? And these kind of things. But there's actually like some kind of like, you know, at least like a range, you know, like limit to like the range of the stats that can roll and stuff, these kind of things to make it like more streamlined.
They did actually say they limit that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which would make sense, yeah.
Like, and then each item that drops is much more impactful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, every click more impactful. That's like I think the goal, but I mean, I don't think they stated that, but that's what it seems like, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, from a player perspective, it's just give me a reason to pick up rare items. I think that alone would make the game better. So
yep.
If
like,
that's the
I
case,
don't know.
then
did you guys all play Last Epoch, or did you try it out with like
yeah,
Exalted?
of course.
Yeah,
Last Epoch
like,
does a good system with items.
It does a really good job, right? Like I don't know if you have to go as far as have like Exalted items, right? But I think the idea is really, really good to have like an item that's like half finished, but then you have to finish it, right? So yeah, just because you can't just take a normal item and finish it, basically. It definitely does make it a lot less, I don't know, predictable, I guess. Yeah.
I think crafting up an item from scratch is also a very interesting experience, though, right? Like if you you are wealthy, so to say, right, and you have like your, you know, your first league starters done, and you have lots of currency lying around, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna craft my gear for my ult now, right? And you know, I'm gonna start now. I'm gonna make this weapon. I'm gonna make this. Yeah, exactly.
It's hype as hell. Like you open Path of Exile, right, and you look at like all these mods, and you basically like make a plan for how you make your items. Like for every item, you have like kind of a plan. You look at the mods, you look at the weightings of how often they occur, right? But if you open Path of Exile as a new player, you also realize there's so many layers, right, that have been introduced over the leagues that I know all of those, but like getting into crafting right now is just ridiculous. And even I don't like buying mats. Whenever I have my crafting sessions for my builds, it's really fun while I do it, but then I'm like, now I have to buy like fucking, I don't know, 2,000 essences, now I have to buy that and that. And it's just, or beasts, right? Holy moly. Yeah, so.
I gotta say that personally, I've actually enjoyed a lot of like SSF and group found lately in PoE when I was playing. So we had like one little like, you know, mini league where we were playing like for like 10 people or so from my community, and that was super hype for me because you didn't have this trading problem. It was just kind of like, okay, hey, I need this, okay, then everyone pooled like all of their, you know, essence of bow to that guy, and then hey, I want to craft a bow, okay, and I need all those essences there, and it only had so many attempts, right? It's only like, okay, I have like 100 essences now, this is it. And if I don't get what I need, I'm done.
Scarcity, yeah.
Yeah,
Scarcity.
exactly. And that was actually really fun. And
Yep.
yeah, you kind of like step away from that goal of having a perfect item and you just like use what you got, and you also like use stuff like the meta crafting much more deliberately, right? Like it's just like, okay, I have like 3 divine orbs, I can do one, suffix cannot be changed, and do like one YOLO attempt with like a veiled chaos orb or something. And well, it hopefully hits something. And when you actually get some result out of that, it feels really good, even if the item is not absolutely perfect. And I think this is also like what applies to most people playing the game, right? Both in PoE1 and also eventually in PoE2, I think, where, you don't necessarily strive for like this ultra perfect item, like 6 T1 mods or something. It doesn't have to be that. If the game is balanced at like a lower level, like let's say, your average end game item, when you played like, let's say 100 hours, it's gonna look like, 1 T1 mod that is like really useful, and then like 3 T2 mods and 2 T3 mods or something. And this is like, kind of like where you're at that point. And this is like a really, really good item that is like worth, let's say, 30 divines in the current meta or something. And then come the better items beyond that, right? So there are actually like, 2 or 3 T1 mods and then 3 T2 mods or something, etc. that are just a bit better. I think that would be probably like optimal, right? Where you have like this extreme high end where people can like really sink those hours, can really sink those currencies in there. And on the other hand, you have like this kind of like somewhat, average, like, kind of close to that at least, where people don't have to feel bad about not having the perfect item.
I think, like you said, with the solo self-found example, it's always just relative to what's possible. Like, what do you have relative to what's possible? So, for example, right now, that was the harvest problem, right, that we talked about earlier, where if it's too easy to make perfect items, now it's nothing special anymore, right? Whereas in solo self-found, it's impossible to make perfect items. So, getting even I don't know, a 5 stat item that's really good is just insane, right? It feels really, really good. So I think whereas people are really concerned right now that we're not going to make those maybe crazy items that you used to see on Reddit anymore, even less could now be just as hype relative to what the game allows you to do, right? And so I think once again, I think it just comes down to, we'll see how they balance it.
The power per mod ratio is going to go up for sure. That's 100% already known. They can obviously balance that, but essentially, I think the modifiers that we are going to be getting are going to be much more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You saw like +3 even in like Act 2
Yep.
and also like the way that the currencies work. So Alchemy Orb can't exceed 4 modifiers when you alch an item. So there's going to be a limit to what kind of items you can make with different currencies, but I kind of disagree. I think perfect items are going to be made, and people are going to be cracking that because the PoE community is insane. And
Well, it was just
people that are dedicating themselves to
it was
this.
obviously just an example. We don't know what's going to happen, right? But,
Yeah. But
if they don't give us the tool, we're not going to make perfect items. That's a fact. If we have the tools, then sure.
I don't know. I think Path of Exile players are a different breed, and
Sure.
you see like people
if
now
it's
like spamming
possible,
like 10,000
they're gonna do
exalts.
it.
Like,
how was
yeah.
it? How was it like back in the day? Like I started in 3.1, I believe. So this was already like, somewhat late in the game cycle, and I haven't like really experienced like the old days of like, literally exalting your maps and shit like that. And like I'm wondering like, how was it back in the day if anyone was around then? Like it's probably
It was a
really,
totally
like,
different game.
Yeah.
And different
I mean-
people were playing.
I mean, in terms of the items and the crafts and the kind of things that people were doing there.
So the thing about today is that we have pretty much everything figured out in comparison to back in the day. Like Path of Exile wasn't a thing. You can plan out your items. There was no formulas for understanding like how rolling for modifiers worked or anything like that. So people were sort of making items that they thought were good, but in today's standard, they're not good at all because of the knowledge that we have, right? So it's basically like we have learned the language now and we can speak it. Whereas back in the day, it was not like that at all, right? And also, there's much more incentive today to create certain types of items, because people. If you are the first person to create an item in Path of Exile, you're gonna get people like 500 people to mirror it, and they're gonna pay you a mirror fee and all that kind of stuff, which is like the intrigue of Trade League, and also the downside of certain trade trends that we're seeing lately. But essentially, I feel like it's very hard to compare back then to today. But yeah, if we look at the item quality of today, it's like items are perfect in today's standard. and they literally are perfect, right? Like you can't get any better, outside of maybe like one stat being crit instead of double damage or something, right? But back in the day, it wasn't like that at all. Like items, you wouldn't have anything close to perfect because people were still figuring out what are the odds of like a mod rolling if I was to use a fossil or something. So it's yeah.
Wasn't
I-
like
I
back in the
guess what.
days,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
from what I've seen, because I started in 3.0, like in 2017, like a league before Woody, basically, right? But sometimes I like to go back and watch like videos, especially like Mathel and stuff, from like 2014. You know, like first league or second league in PoE overall, you know? And as far as I remember, every build guide was based around a 5 link because it was so absurd to actually get a 6 link on an item. This is something I remember. So, as I said, and it's also like the comparison that I like to make when games are reintroducing old games as new. If it's Diablo 2 Resurrected, if it's World of Warcraft Classic, for example, people back in the day were a lot worse player, or at least a lot less knowledge. You know, people had to. If I remember, there's like videos where they progressed a boss for like 60 days, 70 days, upwards 100 days of progress on one single boss to kill it. Now they bring World of Warcraft Classic like 15 years later, and
4
everything gets killed on the
hours.
first day because everything is figured out. Every mechanic, every add-on, people have better PCs, people have stable internet connections. That wasn't the thing back in the days, because good luck getting 40 people in a raid with like a 56K modem and stuff, and actually staying in a raid and stuff like that. And now they just kill everything from the first day on release because everything has been figured out already. You know, and this is exactly the thing, even though I have not played PoE back in the old days, but this is exactly what Tuna says here, right? The knowledge just wasn't there. So people tried to make the best thing out of it, and years later, everything has been figured out, and they're like, bro, hey, if I watched some 2014 PoE gameplay, how bad people were. No, they were not bad. They were just like, this was the knowledge they had. You know, it's just not fair to like compare. That's why it's like so weird. The people are like, hey, I want to have like a classic remade or an old game remade with new graphics, but it's not like everything is there already. They finish the game in like a week, and they are like, but people take them like a year back in the days, you know. So
I think the way I would, I think the way I would like crafting. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, fine.
Okay. The way I would like crafting to be, what I meant earlier, maybe I misspoke, but I would like to, and I think that's how it used to be, where you don't just plan out your perfect item, but you plan out as close to the perfect item as possible. But getting the perfect item would be an accident, right? It would be something where you're like, oh, what the hell? How, right? But but right now you're at the top. You are planning out your perfect items, right? Maybe you have like veiled life in your prefix instead of tier 1 life, right? So boohoo. But that's just something I would like to have in the game, where that I'm kind of missing ever since Harvest got introduced. Even though Harvest got toned down, they give us more and more tools over time. I don't think it's just knowledge, right? So taking away some of those tools is, I think, a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Any other points on that topic with itemization, crafting?
It's gonna be it's. I think it's hard to really know exactly where they want us to go. I do have some concerns in regards to how that's gonna work out for people that do actually want to craft. Like, I don't think sitting there and rolling for item bases, or just like buying 1,000 item bases and alking them and then they're all shit, so throwing them in the bin is like good gameplay. So I am kind of concerned as to how that's gonna work out. But I do like the fact that like finding items is gonna be a lot more valuable. So it's gonna be a balancing act between the two things.
I guess it's the question: do you want to like reward gameplay versus like crafting? I think it's cool that there's people who literally do nothing else but crafting, but does that have to come at the cost of people who want to play the game? I guess is the question.
It has to be a balancing act.
Yeah.
I guess
to those people that is playing the game.
I guess like long term it will be something more up to the community and not so much the developers. I think, you know, as long as there are some forms of crafting, you know, people are gonna do exactly that, right? People are gonna sit there, they're gonna trade for like 20,000 chaos orbs, and they're gonna start crafting, and they're gonna, you know, they're gonna have the spreadsheets of all the different odds, and they have Path of Exile open on like 7 different screens at the same time with like their real-time market analysis of PoE trade, and you know, people are gonna do that, right? But it may be like, you know, probably like less of a thing now, and because actually playing the game is like more rewarding. So I guess we'll see in the end, right?
I mean,
Yeah, we don't know anything right now, so speculating is, I guess.
Yeah. It's probably more of like what is actually good and healthy, I guess. That's like more of the question, I guess. And I think we've seen like a lot of different ideas.
In the end of the day, I really enjoy exactly this kind of mentality that PoE offers. For example, in the roundtable, they said like, we designed Path of Exile to be like a hack and slash game. We want the player to go out there in the maps and kill monsters, But with having like PoE trade, like an open trade platform, people can decide what they want to do. There's people that farm maps all day long. There's bossers, there's magic finders, there's crafters, there's like people that do nothing else but playing PoE trade all day long as a form of a market simulator, manipulating the market and stuff like that. It's the same with like, I'm not feeling forced to play a certain league mechanic because it's better than the others. And this is like what Path of Exile does so freaking great when I say like, hey, I really enjoy Delve, and I can, even years later after its release, I can still go and Delve, Yeah, sometimes it's like more like profitable than other things and less profitable and things. But me as a player, I can decide what is the most fun for me in this game, and this is what I'm doing, And even if I found the same map all day long, or if I say, hey, I like to blow up legions with my build, the other one says, hey, I like to craft all day long. So I feel this is the undisputed best thing about Path of Exile, that whatever comes into my mind, whatever brings the most joy for myself, this is what I can do, and will still be relevant to whatever other people are doing, So I think this is great. So I don't really see, maybe it's gonna be, I think like it's just play first and judge later kind of thingy, how they're gonna fix everything, because there's still like a year to wait until the beta starts, and so many things gonna change. So we just like, sit here and talk about things that might be or might not be. And all of a sudden, like the last 4 years, we talked about 2 different campaigns, one end game, and all of a sudden, hey, by the way, it's 2 different games now, so we all start over again. So you never know what's gonna happen, So
yeah, fair point. I mean, it's so far out, and I guess we're gonna get like more frequent and updates from now on. I mentioned, right? They kind of kept everything under wraps. They showed us like there's one trailer here, one trailer there, and that was basically it, right? We had no information, really. And now, it's kind of like out there, right? And now the discussion is going, and now they're probably gonna also give us, I'm not sure if they like already like mentioned that. Did they announce that they're gonna have like maybe regular updates or something? But I imagine we're gonna see a lot of development, like where they said, okay, like we considered this part of the game, and we're gonna do this instead. And I guess we're gonna see a lot of that leading up to beta and launch eventually.
I hope we do get more spoilers and more insights and things like that. Because we haven't heard, like, last Exilecon happened, and then we didn't hear anything about PoE2 for 4 years. So, and that's why a lot of people were, like, shocked when they announced the split and all that kind of stuff. So, now that they've showed stuff, and now that the whole, like, surprise has happened, I do hope and wish that they keep us updated on the development and, like, give us some, like, sneak previews, some teasers, whatnot.
Yeah, I see that our podcast guests here are actually typing in chat a lot. So, do you have maybe something else you wanna like comment on or something?
No, I guess I just had a discussion like because people were talking about making perfect gear and stuff like that, and we want to make mirror tier gear, but in reality, like people mirror whatever is the best. If 5-stat with one craft is the best, people are gonna mirror that. They're mirroring the best thing, and that's how it used to be back before Harvest. Like you wouldn't have perfect items, but the best item is the one that everybody goes for. Yeah. And they mirror it, and then maybe 1 month later somebody makes a better item, and then they mirror that, right? Like the top end. It doesn't matter how high you get, but that's what's gonna get mirrored, right? The best thing that you can get to.
Yeah, I remember like mirroring things when I was like delving that had like T3 mods and whatnot, because it was like nowadays, literally impossible to make perfect items with what we had.
Like divining as well and stuff like that, right? Like we used to like mirror items that are just not perfectly prepared, and that's just like a sign of the time. But nowadays, it's a different thing.
For sure. I think one thing that does make me a little bit sad about current mirror market is that it's like we've gone to the point where it's like so monopolized by certain groups because of such a high incentive to do so, that it's no longer, I don't know, it's almost like Walmart has come to town and all the mom and pop shops have closed. And I do hope to see a little bit more of that in PoE2. Like,
I
And
mean,
what would be the
I don't know.
solution though? Like, how would you break that monopoly?
you kind of have to remove synthesized items because there is certain base items with the perfect combination of synthesized modifiers that are so freaking hard to get and so rare that they maybe appear like once or twice in entire league. So if you want to make a mirror tier craft and you have all the funds to do it, but you're missing the right base for it because somebody else snagged it before you, yeah, you better off keeping your life surge open and try
Yeah,
to
so-
get another item with another like perfect base, like cluster jewels and stuff like that. Like, it's not like having the perfect item; it's also having the perfect stats on the
Exactly.
perfect possible base.
Yeah, the base
You
so
know,
is
many
the,
layers of
and
complexity.
I think the beast that they introduced was the biggest change, right? The Sim 3 roll beast, I think, started it to get even more and more degenerate. I think if
Yeah.
they just like removed that or whatever, that would already be huge. But yeah, I don't. I think we're too far gone. I think.
Yeah,
Like,
so
they
it's
would have
basically
to
at the,
make a huge shift.
yeah, it's basically at the point where no one even has the chance to start crafting on a
To
competitor
start
item.
crafting,
So,
yeah.
Exactly.
And this, by the way,
Yeah.
this was the same problem in Synthesis. I remember playing Synthesis League, right? And I remember making like the first percentage int damage per int like implicit, right? And if you guys remember, the problem was you can't really start crafting because there wasn't a good base in like week 2 because the items were so scarce. So you had to wait until like month
One
2.
guy comes online or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that these guys come online, or then month 3 to actually get like the chance to start crafting your perfect item. I remember I put it for fracture fossil, like back then you would like fracture fossil.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, and I put it up because I was like, I'm not gonna craft this because literally 2 weeks from now somebody else is gonna have better implicits than me, so I'm just wasting my time, right? And that's what I feel like right now as well. It's like whenever I have a synth implicit, I'm like, dude, there's a dude who has an omni ring with percentage strength, percentage dex, percentage int. Why would I ever make this ring mirror tier if that ring exists, right? There's no reason to. And I'm never gonna get that base. So yeah, you can't even start crafting. And I mean, they could solve this with, for example, being able to transfer implicits from one item to another. So you could craft first and then maybe later upgrade your implicit. Something like that would be cool. But I think we're too far gone in that, and they would have like to make drastic changes. Like,
Yeah, like for example, like limiting implicit to like one modifier, so it is more common. And it's not like I have an explodey bow for my EK Ignite that also has increased fire damage on it and increased burning damage because this is a one-of-a-kind base and this will be undisputed the best base for this build and nobody else has a space. This reminds me of like when I played like strength stacking or something. I think it was a league where Belton had like this one triple like strength, dex, intelligence percentage, 18% all the way on the like an implicit belt. So you know up front, I've never seen this kind of base, you know, and it most likely will never appear again. So I don't even have to start crafting a belt because this guy has already the perfect item or base to start crafting. So there is no market for that. And I think as long as there is the option to have like 3 different implicit modifiers that can be matched, for example, +1 power charge ring together with I don't know, X2C lightning damage per power charge and spell damage per power charge. This triple trifecta combination is so perfect, and if you don't have like thousands of divines to actually be able to do that kind of base, it's useless to start crafting. So if they would remove it to like just having one synthesized implicit, this could be replicated. For example, an explodey bow is to start off with, or any like percentage strength belt, then it would be easier. But the more implicits, the better the combinations can be, the more ridiculous it gets, and then you're like kind of left alone. So
This is such a like 0.001%
Yeah.
conversation, but it's definitely
It
worth
is.
having and noting
Okay.
because
That is
I
true.
I still think that some of the most iconic moments, right? Like maybe that's just our bubble, but I was always hyped, even when I was like newer. Like, what was the Fizz dagger that they made back in the day, which was like one of the first. That was fun with the first times I got introduced into crafting. Like it was one of the most iconic items. I think like an
The
ambusher.
triple T1 fists, right? Like
Yeah.
merciless
That-
and stuff like.
Yeah, that was so. I think it's still cool to have these like
I don't remember
iconic Loathbane. Yeah, Loathbane. Those iconic 0.1%er items are still kind of cool to look at, right? Like even I
For
don't
sure.
know. Maybe it's just me. Yeah.
No, for sure.
I agree. I personally am also like someone who like I never think about like mirror tier gear or something like that. You know, I like to blast. I like to make my own stuff, but my budget for builds is somewhere in like range of like 10 to maybe 40 div, you know, for the entire build.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm
Yeah.
like very far away from that mirror tier stuff, and I just like to like make my build, you know, kind of like reasonably, you know, well-rounded basically with that. And it's still fun to see those items, right? It's still like, you know, like also like when people like explain how they did it, you know, how they crafted that thing, and they have like this entire description on those Reddit posts and stuff. It's really cool to see, honestly, right? And I think a lot of people also learn something from that. So it's not just that, you know, it's only those 0.001% of players that have those items, it's also like everyone else seeing those items and kind of like, it kind of creates this like learning experience.
This is the beauty of Path of Exile, the what is possible, right? And this is exactly the moments Palsteron talks about. If somebody out of like the hundreds of thousands of players is lucky enough to hit this, you know, everybody's like,
Exactly.
holy moly, dude.
And that's why it was so special back in the day, because I think the Loathbane wasn't really planned. You couldn't plan it back then.
No,
you literally could plan it.
Impossible.
So it was like so hype, and everybody was like, "How?" Right? And then nowadays it's just like, "Oh wow, this guy put 4,000 divines into his body armor. Nice."
Okay, this is a dangerous thought.
And he spammed for like 10 days or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
But Harvest kind of killed this
I
kind
don't
of
know.
thingy for me.
Harvest, ever since Harvest, this definitely.
But see, that's the thing. I was about to just say that, like, the reason we have that is because of the fact that crafting now is deterministic. Like, it's just more about how many exalts do you have, or how many divines do you have.
Or you can pull together on your in your guild, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of a side effect. But at the same time, on the mid to low end of crafting right now is in a pretty damn good state. Like, I know people will obviously be like, but I had a bad time with
crafting is
or
dead.
whatever. Yeah, but I mean, like, compared to any point in time in Path of Exile outside of Harvest League, crafting is like as good as it's ever been, with like you know, the influences and whatnot, like, you know, not Shaper and Elder and that kind of stuff, but I mean, you know, the new Alice influences with the Exarch, and so you're able to get like 80% of the way there on a character these days with, you know, decent investment, sure, but like people can replicate your build now, right? Like, you make a build, you know, people can actually get there. And it wasn't really like, so you can actually like the quality of builds has gone up so much because of that, because you can kind of expect people to eventually get there with enough time. Where I don't think, like, if you were to make like a build like we do nowadays, anybody could have replicated that, even just like back in like 3.12 or something. It was like people played like PvE with Brightpeak. That's what we played back then, and Impulsa, you know.
The thing, it always comes down it always comes down to the balancing, right? Like, because most of the times, do we need perfect items? No, absolutely not. I do not need mirror tier items to beat the game. It's just what we as a player, this is the thing that drives us to log in every single day and farm more currency. Even though I'm already able to do the entire game, I still want to make this perfect character, and Path of Exile gives me the tools to do so. So it always comes down to the balancing. So yeah, we want to have the best perfect character, and we want to like face tank everything, and we want to one-shot everything. But is it necessary, or is it required to do the game? No, it's not. So this is like, it's just like one more aspect of the game, why it is so great, why it keeps me playing after so many hours, and looking forward to next league, because, hey, what items do we get this time? What uniques do we get this time? What kind of like crazy little thing build can we do this time, you know? So it's always relatively to the balancing, and this involves like everything, right? Like the crafting aspect and whatnot. So if you're super fine with like even like a bunch of T4 stats to beat the entire game, which would kind of be sad, but it would be the casual way, you know, people would still go out of their way and try to create like 6 times T1 items just because they can, you know. So, but it's necessary. It's always like the question of balancing, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any other like final words on that topic? Else, I think we can also wrap it up here. We had a really good discussion. I'm very glad that we sat down together. I want to have like a little like outro from everyone. So I would like to hear again, like for our viewers who may not know you, like first of all, tell us again, like, you know, where people can find you. Maybe one sentence what you do, and also I want to hear from everyone one thing that you really want in PoE2 that they have not announced yet, and one thing that they have announced that you really don't like. Let's start with Tuna this time.
All right. The one thing in PoE2 that I would really like to see is I I want something that has endless scaling. So something like
That comes
like
to
Greater
Diablo.
Rifts, Mythic Plus, or something like that, where I can just endlessly sort of upgrade my character and play the game. Kind of like Delve, but Delve wasn't endless. That's sort of the problem with it, and then it got solved completely, and now it's kind of a joke. So, and then that's like probably like a power creep problem as well. That actually I think D3 faced as well. That you could get to 150 in like 3 days in a group, right? So then it's like, what do you do after? But I think the real fun part was when
actually
you couldn't.
It's actually way faster than that these days, but yeah.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, I would love something like that to be in the game. And one thing I really don't like is getting stunned out of animations and having the animations be like extremely long, wind up, and I
Same
really
thing.
I
Fuck.
don't want the game to feel like sludge. Basically, like if I'm playing the game and I feel like I'm in quicksand, I'm gonna want to uninstall. Just please, please don't let that be a thing. That's my main two things for sure.
Okay, yeah, Palsteron.
So what I don't want in the game is, I guess I had the same answer as Tuna, but the second one would be I don't want Magic Find. Remove Magic Find and make it more interesting for people to make stronger characters. Give them like better rewards for that. And what I want that I haven't seen yet is actually recombinators, because they used to be OP, but I think with how the new items are shipping out to be and you don't have as much control, I think they would fit perfectly into the game.
Mm-hmm. mbX?
The first thing I was wondering, like when you said like, yo, what would you like to have, and what did you see what you don't want to have, for example, right? I was like, please don't pick me as the first because I have no clue, right? So you pick Tuna and the Palsteron, I'm sitting here in third in line, I'm like, I still have no clue what to say, you know? I'm like a gamer, you know? Give me something to play, and then I can judge like, hey, this was good, this was bad, right? But for the thing that I would like to have in PoE2 is some form of PvP. I think like this original classic Diablo 2 PvP scene and stuff like that, you know, that was like it was crazy back in the days, but in some form, no game ever had recreated this or in any way. I know we have PvP in Path of Exile, but it sucks. I know we have PvP in Diablo 4, but it sucks. I know we have PvP in lots of other games, but it always comes down to, I don't like one-shot somebody or something like that, but maybe this time around with PoE2, with a slower game style, with dodge roll, with like planning your abilities, and hey, there is like you PvP like a warrior and he's coming big with a big slam, and you are like the monk and you are like counteracting this with like hammering him back, you know, with a shockwave and stuff like that. To have like an interesting PvP kind of thing, that would be great, because this is the one thing that I kind of like miss in all these like ARPGs, honestly. Because yeah,
And I just, because you just reminded me, because you said PvP. You know what I hate about PvP in ARPGs? It makes it so you have to balance more, right? Like if you have an OP build, if it's just for you and you're just fighting as monsters, that's not frustrating for anybody, right? So they can maybe balance it in like 3 months and you can have fun with your broken build or whatever. But once there's PvP in the game, now you have to balance it, because otherwise the other person is just going to be pissed off, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's what I
It
was
could be balanced
disliked
for
about it.
PvP though.
Yeah, but then that takes resources. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I guess.
Of course.
I mean, they have PoE Royale, no? Where you have like only the early game
Oh my
stuff and
god! Stop.
That was not even that bad. It was just like the problem
Yeah.
that it was like way too much experience. Like if somebody had a good start, I remember I was playing this like it was Twitch Rivals, I think, right? Where we had like I was teaming up. I can't remember. I think it was Terrence or somebody. And there was like guys that literally had a good head start, found like the perfect gem in the start, killed 1 or 2 players, and then you meet them. You just killed your first 5 zombies. You're like level 3, and this guy comes along with level 7 and one-shots you. Whereas said like, I mean, I don't even had a chance. Like, what the hell, you know? So just because he found the gem, and like, if they could balance this, I think this battle royale thing was actually super fun to play. Like, honestly, I really liked it. It just needs more balancing in the end of the day, but it was cool. It was actually fun.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I've tried it out a little bit as well, and I think this is kind of like the only way to make PvP somewhat reasonable, right, in these kind of games, because late game, you have like all these crazy, you know, uniques and tools and stuff for your character. Early game, not so much though. Early game is usually kind of like very basic, right? And much
Yeah.
easier to balance. So
Much balance.
yeah. But okay, I think with that we can wrap it up here. I think that was a great discussion. I was very happy to sit down with you guys for this podcast. That was the first time I did a PoE podcast. Usually I was doing these for Diablo 4 stuff because that recently released. We had a lot of people, a lot of voices and a lot of stuff to talk about there. I can definitely see myself doing this again for PoE in the future as well. I'm personally like more of a D3 guy, D4 guy now, but I've also played a lot of PoE. So
we're gonna convert you to PoE2. Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean PoE2 also for me looks exciting. So
I think the future will look like everybody's just gonna play like games again, and we're not gonna think as much about like Path of Exile versus Diablo or shit.
Yeah, I also agree that it's kind of like a pointless discussion. It's like a matter of taste, and some people like this one, some people like that one, and some people like both. Whatever, right? So this is like my opinion as well. But yeah, so
hardcore solo self-fun, by the way.
Hardcore as death, by the way. Yeah, exactly. Ruthless as well. Yeah. I know ruthless is not a thing, right? In PoE2. So.
Well, not yet. Not yet. Not yet.
Well,
just wait for it, I guess.
All right, and also obviously thanks to everyone in chat who was joining here and discussing and watching and sometimes throwing in some interesting topics. So we had our guests here. Those are all big PoE blasters, in case you don't know them. mbXtreme, Crouching Tuna, Palsteron. You can find them on Twitch, on YouTube, on Maxroll. They're all Maxroll PoE writers. Yeah, thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, well, good luck with the rest of the league and the new league and everything. So,
all right, man. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Cheers. Have a good one, guys.
Cheers.